All right, welcome to the Sae Bae cast number 232 with mods Husky and Lenny. Husky and Lenny, how are we doing today?
Yeah, I'm doing good. It's exciting to be here.
Echo the same sentiments. It's a good excuse for me to do a session specking down Corp while just chatting about the game.
Oh, hell yeah. That throws me back to like 4 years ago when I had Jack RS on the cast and I was running some Corp in the background. Just basically like it was thematic for him because he just went so dry on that Ellie.
So if I get an Ellie mid cast, like you'll probably know.
Yeah, Sae Bae cast will go down in history.
I feel like I'm slacking now, just being at sand crabs on the game.
Oh, I'm just chopping U's, so me and you are in the same department, or just
perfect.
Yeah. Well, cool. So, obviously, very excited. All the JMod casts are just wonderful. It's just a pleasure for me to get to speak with you both. And we got some topics on Reddit this time, so got a lot of things to ask. Obviously, this is going to be more centered on sailing because sailing is like the big topic. Obviously, there's been some other big topics just lately. I know sailing's in the discussion, and we were just talking before this recording. Like, okay, there's just been a blog sent out. You guys are kind of going back to the drawing board, it seems like, with the stackable clues and stuff. I'm curious, is there anything you guys do want to say about stackable clues? It sounds like obviously that's not your guys's department, really. So, but is there anything that you would want to say on that?
I think it's kind of hard to. I think obviously there's a team that's looking into it. They've gone back to the drawing board. Who knows when this comes out? Maybe the players will know what that is. But as for any specifics, couldn't really say. I personally wasn't involved in those meetings, at least where they were talking about it today. So yeah, and I don't really know which direction they are going to go.
Yeah, it does seem. I mean, obviously it's a pretty emotional topic for a lot of players because clue scrolls are like obviously super OG content, and there's been changes unpulled and pulled over the years, and it's just I'm interested to see where the team takes it and where the community decides it should be and stuff. But so okay, that's good to know. I think it sounded like I think it was a screenshot of the blog. It said they're trying to get something out in the next 2 weeks about stackable clues, so we'll see. But let's discuss sailing. So obviously the sailing alpha ended a couple weeks ago, and you guys collected a bunch of data, and obviously there was a blog post about all that data that was collected. And what are your guys' like overall thoughts? How did you feel it went? Are you pleasantly surprised with it? Maybe were you maybe disappointed in how the players reacted? Let's start with you, Husky, and then we'll go to Lenny.
Yeah, I'm pretty happy with how it went as a whole. I think the biggest thing that people will talk about specific bits of content and all this, but the big question was just like, how do boats feel, right? Like, how does it feel to sail around? How does the movement feel? Is it intuitive? Definitely spent a lot of time watching people's streams, like their first time seeing did they get stuck on this or that or whatever. And I think it's just as a whole gone pretty well. I think the overwhelming feedback I've seen is how it's a good mix of janky old school, but also intuitive at the same time, which is sounds like praise. Survey results definitely seem to echo that, and a lot more of the feedback around it has been like the nuances of feedback on how does specific content feel or other things. Yeah, as a whole, I think it went pretty well, and pretty bug free and smooth for an alpha. I think I'm very proud of the team putting out something that I think is probably higher quality than industry standard for an alpha typically is.
Awesome.
Yeah, I think like Husky says, I'm overall just very happy with how it all went. It's been a huge amount of effort coming to this point. And for the scale of it, obviously it's not quite the scale of the full skills release, but for the scale of what we did put out there, it went incredibly smoothly. That's sort of, where my expectations were about it. I think the closer we got to the alpha, the more in line my expectations were with what we actually ended up sort of hitting. 2 months prior to launch, I was all over the place. I didn't know how people were going to feel about it. But, the closer we got, I was, sort of nailing in, yep, we've got something good here. People are going to have mixed opinions for sure. But I had a pretty good sort of sense of is it just going to feel old school? And I thought, yeah, it will.
Yep. So we do have, first of all, that's great to hear, honestly. And I felt like I ran a poll on my YouTube community post, and it was just like, how are you guys feeling at pre-alpha and then post-alpha? And the results looked pretty similar. However, there was slightly less pessimism after it, and it was somewhat optimistic. But then also the super optimistic people also just became somewhat optimistic. So it was like the scaling ended up being more people optimistic, but just not super optimistic. It was just like, okay, like now that we've actually played it, it's not as bad as maybe some people were thinking, but it's also not maybe as wonderful as people were also thinking on the super optimistic end prior to it. So, and I wanted to make this point as well. I mean, literally you put any skill from level 1 to 30 in an alpha, even if it was perfectly, I mean, I'm trying to think of literally any skill where anybody would enjoy that, from going from level 1 to 30 in an alpha. Like that, just no skill would really hit that hard. And I think, was it Modden In I just had on was saying like, maybe it would have been better to have shown off the alpha from levels like 50 to 60 or something a little bit more like, okay, this is actually going to be the grind you're doing. But the 1 to 30, how did you guys feel about that? Do you think that ended up being a detriment, or do you think it's actually a good place because you're getting feedback on most likely the worst part of the skill, which is the early levels?
I think for me, it was about setting a foundation and setting a baseline sort of like expectations, right? Like even going into this alpha, we see a lot of like misconceptions about what sailing is. You know, there are people who are still convinced it was going to be instanced content, like, or like player owned ports from RuneScape, right? Like, so even just like across the board, players going, oh, this is actually what sailing is, whether they tried it or they just watched videos, because, you know, there was a lot of content going out around it. I think just establishing that baseline is like, I mean, a pretty solid thing for the community, which means that those discussions can sort of be like better framed, I guess, towards what we're actually developing in the future.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that showing 1 to 30 probably helps that a lot more, because it is still does still have an amount of complexity to it with sailing, where like I think like if I gave a player like a much higher level boat, there might have just been more points of confusion, right? Or just like because they didn't understand the baseline fundamentals, like it was just a bigger jump and just harder to understand. But I know that like players have been excited about like, ooh, I want to get on a boat and do XYZ, and a lot of those like high level ideas that players have had might not be envisioned in 1 to 30. So I definitely see that side of the argument, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think the complexity of it aside, it's an interesting question as to, you know, the vast majority of the time that you're going to spend playing the skill isn't going to be levels 1 to 30. You know, you're going to spend a lot more time on the higher end. So in that regard, you know, it's probably nicer to be looking at the higher end. But at the same time, if, you know, levels 1 to 30 are so unbearable that you really just cannot drag yourself through them, and you're not going to get to levels 50 plus, you know, we've got a problem there. We need to make sure that those early levels are something that people are going to be able to sort of actually take to and get to the rest of the skill.
Yeah. Okay, here's one thing that I have read on Reddit, and it usually comes down to like, skills are supposed to be boring, you know? Skills are not supposed to be like, look at every skill in RuneScape. It's really about like the destination. It's just like you got to get it done. And I feel like that's been sort of a mindset shift over the years, because there actually is a reward to getting 99 for skills, like real rewards, and Max Cape obviously exists. And how do you guys feel? Like, it just feels like there's a lot of comparisons to skills. I mean, some people on the other end that are really pessimistic towards sailing are like, this feels like a mini game. And then people are like, I mean, what? I don't know. There's just a lot going on. There's many groups of people that are just either for it or against it. And I feel like there's a lot of weird comparisons going on. And like, how do you guys feel about the comparisons that are made? Obviously, there's many to go through, but like, in regards to the skill feeling like a mini game, for example, or the skill supposed to be in a way boring, because that's like the identity of old school, is skilling is boring and monotonous. How do you guys feel about those sentiments being made?
It's an interesting one. I think skills aside, the game as a whole has evolved so much over the years. Where if you look back to pre 2007, the skills that were being released were a lot less sort of interactive, a lot less complex, and obviously people find their enjoyment in it. But it's just different to sort of what we're trying to offer now. In the same sense as if you look back at what bosses were being released back then, you were getting Giant Mole and King Black Dragon. They've not got any of the same sort of complexity as something like Theatre of Blood does, or whatever other boss you sort of might want to compare it to nowadays. Um, the game as a whole has just kind of changed the landscape completely, and all of those older, less complex things definitely still have their space in the game, but just aren't necessarily the sort of the expected level of content nowadays.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I think that if you released, say, Yama as the sequential update to, say, Caliphite Queen, you'd have a lot of players back then sort of saying, like, this doesn't feel very old school. But for bosses, we can see the entire, like, line of content has progressed. You know, the things that work, the things they didn't work. And we know now what the standard of, say, a 2025 boss looks like. We know that any piece of content we release in 2025 has to be held to 2025 standards, right? Like, I think, like, it's the challenge of saying, can you keep it as close to old school as possible? And what is old school is the perpetual sort of question, right? That everyone's trying to find the answer to. And to be honest, I don't think there's a definition. I think it's more like a memory or feeling or vibe of what is old school more than anything. I think it's very hard to define, even if there are some principles you can follow. But like following that on is that, like, we're trying to imagine, like, what does a skill look like in 2025, but a player's missed like the iterations over like a decade, right? Of skills, because we haven't released like a skill every year.
Yeah,
So there's a fine line there.
yeah, it's so much easier to see the sort of progression of bosses over the past 12 years, where step by step they've gotten to the state they are today. Whereas, yeah, like Husky says, we can't just afford to now 12 years on be making that first step and kind of gradually increasing the sort of scale of it all. We've kind of got to live up to today's standards now.
It feels like skilling has so much more hesitancy toward like toward improvements or toward maybe rate increases or just the actual activity itself. It seems like PVM has so much more freedom. It's like maybe it's because skills have always had more of a more purist community behind it, where they're like, we don't want anything to change. We're just very like conservative with like, this is how skills should be until the end of time. Where PVM was just like, do whatever you want, sort of, and the community was just like, we just want fun. And I mean, you see skilling these days, and it's like, there's really not much. I mean, besides some high level methods, I guess, and Sepulcher. I think Sepulcher is just the one piece of skilling content that always comes to mind where it's like, hey, this is actually a challenge. It's going to take some time to get into, and then it just becomes super fun. With PVM, it's just like everything's getting harder and harder and harder, but fun as well and challenging, and you're learning things. I think most skilling updates we see still has this hesitancy to kind of cater to everybody and be very mobile friendly, and there's nothing that you're going to put out that's going to be too challenging or something like that. Like, how do you guys see that sort of divide between skilling and PVM?
I think it's something that sort of 12-year gap's definitely sort of lent into more. People have had so long now to sort of grow used to how skills are. I think, if we were having this conversation back when Old School first released and trying to sort of make a lot more changes to how skilling is back at that point, we'd probably be in a very different position today. And it really is just the fact that, yeah, it's such a fundamental part of the game at this point. It's something that people have grown so used to.
I think it's also just something where the thematic of a boss lends itself to the ladder of like, what's the next big bad thing we're beating? Like players almost expect like raids 2 to be harder than raids 1, raids 3 to be harder than raids 2, right? There's not necessarily the same thing for a skill, where players expect the next skill to be harder to train, and like skills have always had like an amount of skill expression, but it's normally like tick accuracy and consistency, and that's still been prevalent in a lot of like modern skill launch releases, right? Like the satisfaction of doing even like a Guardians of the Rift and like nailing the windows, getting the ticks, it still like happens, right? Even if like it's not to the same like it's not like it's hard. It's just about like it feels good that you didn't lose ticks and that you kept up the rhythm and you everything lined up well as it should. Or like, you know, just the satisfying feeling of like one ticking all your essence right out of the pouch.
Yeah.
You know. So it's definitely a thing that exists, but like PVM definitely has way more scope to be more complex. I think though as well for skilling, like what you've outlined is that like we knew this in refinement. Like sailing isn't a new conversation for I guess me at least. I've been on the project a little bit longer than Lenny, like back through refinement. And it's like we already knew everybody wanted different things, right? From the first surveys of asking, do you want a gathering skill? Do you want a production skill? Do you want a utility skill? Right? Like we already knew that players wanted like completely like this wide array of things, expectations. And I think that's one of the things we've just been trying to nail with sailing, where we're aware some people will just be happy to have something to AFK on the side. And for those people, there's things like shipwreck salvaging. We know that people really want to get involved with exploring and discovering new things, and hopefully charting leans into that a little bit. And then for people who really do like the sort of tick perfect gameplay, or like that challenge of like doing something more leaned in, Barracuda Trials will be for them. And Port Tasks is kind of that middle ground where it's like, you know, moving your boat's pretty laid back, but you've still got decisions, and it's more about the high level strategy, I suppose, part of it, rather than the actual like how good you are at doing them. So yeah, we're trying to appease a lot of different players. Hopefully that's come across. I think the feedback from the alphas looked fairly well, but yeah, you are correct with a lot of that, right? Like it's like, I guess like for people who see like skills as like not evolving and stuff, like they're still fundamentally like a thing a lot of players are just like doing to complete, right? So I think having different options to engage with that is like quite healthy for like the skill, and that's what we're trying to do. I think I've rambled off a little bit there, but hopefully that like kind of makes sense.
It does. And this is something that I apologize up front to you both, because this is something we were talking before the call that we didn't want to touch on, and I will respect it still, but I just am going to bring it up and you guys can be fully transparent. Like one of the things I kind of see as any new skill coming out, because I imagine if sailing lands and it's just great and over the years it gets a lot of updates, people are going to want another skill. And I think how I see new skills coming out, this is just my personal take, is like it almost feels like any new skill kind of needs to be fast in a way, like at least the XP per hour. And again, this is something you guys will not state until toward the end, because obviously XP rates can easily be shifted around, and you're going to kind of base it on, you know, how the community feels and how the team feels about everything. But what is your guys' just take on not specific XP rates, but just XP rates in general for skills? I mean, you guys have so much data on your end to see, you know, what skills really fail. I mean, what are the reasons why agility fails, for example? Is it just how boring it is, or is it really just the XP per hour? And the same thing goes with fire making. I mean, Wintertod is so fast. Would people just actually not like the skill if it was just half the XP rate? Because that's where I'm coming from. I just feel like skills with our current gaming like community, like the current like culture is basically like skills are more fun when they're fast, because there is this like subconscious thing going on that you want to complete it. So I just wonder for you guys in general with new skills and with older skills, how much of a role does XP per hour play in the funness or the satisfaction of the skill?
Where do you rank construction?
Ooh,
Out of curiosity.
Because
it's like the fastest. Yeah. And I don't know many people who say, damn, I love construction because it's 800k XP an hour. Like, I don't see that as a sentiment in the community generally, right?
That's a good point. I think construction, we have so many Iron Men playing now, and classic construction has actually had some nice quality of life where you can left click everything now and it's just really fast. But truly, the actual method is just clicking, and some people really enjoy that sort of like monotonous, just, okay, I'm just going to click on this rhythm. But Mahogany Homes, I feel like, is pretty good, but there is that lack of sort of reward structure because construction was supposed to be kind of a gold sync skill. But there's just something super satisfying about getting to those level milestones with construction. So at least if you're just asking me personally, I enjoy construction, and this is coming from like an iron-pilled player where it's just like, I just think the amount of perks you get from the skill make it a really rewarding skill, kind of like Herblore. What do you think?
I think that's kind of my point, though, right? I see a lot of people say, I like construction because I like the idea of building out my house and I've got my space to customize, or I like the perks that it involves, the rewards. I know some people, generally who just like the rhythm of like, oh, it's quite chill to get into construction. But I've never heard anyone go, I love construction because it's fast. Now, players in their efficiency mindset tend to just sort of say like, oh, I want things to be as fast as physically possible, right? But like I want to get to the goal in the shortest amount of time. But I've always been a proponent of like it's the journey, not the destination, right? Now that doesn't mean the journey has to be a slog, right? I think there's more to agility than it just being slow, right? For people disliking it, like it came up with the run energy changes, that people saying that it's not just agility being slow, it's because of the lack of reward space. I think that the problem with bringing up any conversation about XP rates is it warps the entire conversation, where players are suddenly saying, I think this is too fast, I think this is too slow, usually the latter. But right now for sailing, we're more focused on like, how does the gameplay feel? How does the reward space feel? Which, we're hoping to blog at some point before launch, obviously, with like the rewards. What are the reasons of training it? Those are far more important discussions than how fast it is, because those numbers can be changed even up to launch. And it's something that like, we wouldn't want players to get hung up on. I know last time Elena quoted like 100k XP an hour when she was on here, and after speaking to her about it, she kind of felt like she owed the players like an answer, if that makes sense. But at the same time, she was trying to play it safe. It was very like rock in a hard place. And I would just say that like any numbers that like we've given are just very much just like, they're under constant review, and they will be until the skill launches. And I'm sure they will be post-launch as well. My feeling as a whole is what feels right for the activity, like do it. So as for sailing XP rates, is it going to be the slowest skill? No. Is it going to be construction? Probably also no.
Lenny, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, I think the whole sort of reward space and perks side of things that you touched on was really interesting, and I think you mentioned sort of we got a lot of data to look on, and over the years, if you looked at data, what's a lot more easy to pick out is not that people will engage with these skills because they've got these XP rates, but that they'll engage with these skills up until a point until they've unlocked a certain thing. I think for years you'd look at thieving, and you'd see people would all just drop off. The average player would stop at 53 thieving and 50 fire making because those were the highest quest requirements for it. And so it's a lot easier to sort of tie it to why is the player pushing ahead as it is to consider the XP rates involved. And if you put a good enough reason in front of someone, they're going to train a skill even if it is very slow. They're not going to have fun, and that's not what we want. We want to make sure it is fun and engaging. They enjoy the time training it, but the data is kind of an interesting reflection of that, because they will just push until we reward them.
Yeah, I almost see the comparison, at least in regards to PVM, is like you can have the most enjoyable bossing experience, but if the rewards are awful, that's like the XP rate. If we were to kind of look at a skill, like you can have the most fun activity going on with sailing, but if the XP per hour isn't there, it's just going to feel worse. So like if some people think Theater of Blood is like the most fun piece of content, and if there was just super lackluster rewards and the normal loot was awful, people would genuinely just have like, they would see the content as less fun because it doesn't have those like super big ticket rewards. And I kind of see that with sailing, where I see sailing as so much of the fun really will be the numbers that you're seeing going up. I mean, our community is like, number go up, like that is what feels good. And the higher the number, the better that dopamine hits. So anyway, I wanted to bring that up, obviously, if there's anything else you guys would like to add with that, but it does sound like obviously this is going to be something addressed really toward the end of the thing, and the feel is what you guys are more focused on.
Yeah, I think one thing that the alpha highlighted to us as well is that we really just like don't know the XP rates until we have a lot longer to play around with them. Mm-hmm. There were people that were sort of discovering funky tick manipulation, shipwreck salvaging combined with using the wind catcher, sailing straight into a bit of salvage.
Keybox. Yeah.
Yeah, and it was, like, we hadn't figured out that that strat by this point. So, it's just impossible for us to sort of really know until we've had longer to play around with it, until we've had more people's hands on it, and sort of get a really good grip on it.
That's a good point. Husky, did you have anything else before we get into some of these topics?
Yeah, I guess like something I kind of want to touch on the same thing, and it's a bit like idealistic. It's hard to give like concrete examples of like, oh, sailing will do this better because X or Y. But I think in general, something I would like to avoid with sailing is the sort of trap that some skills fall into where you get the, like, how to put it, like skills usually identify as either really fast or really slow, and there tends to be not much in between. It's just like, and it's like that from the get-go, and it's like that till you finish. And I think something that like, there are some skills where like you just teleport to like level 50, it feels like, and you didn't care about any of the unlocks because it wasn't worth changing to do another activity because the XP was just so high compared to what you're doing. On the flip side, sometimes you unlock the best thing at like level 60 or 70 and then it never changes, right? I would like sailing to be better at that. Like have more meaningful unlocks as you're training the skill. Have unlocks that impact the XP rate more directly. It's like how many skills have a relative what try to say like a relevant training method at like that's unlocked in say like high 80s or low 90s. It's usually not the case, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think like you suddenly go from needing say 200k XP to level in the 80s to needing like 600k in the 90s. And I'm not saying let's give you triple the XP per hour, but you can give a nudge at the higher levels, right? I think that's something I'd idealistically like to do. Whether we like get there with it or whether it makes sense, because we're balancing a lot of levers at once, we'll see. But that's something I would like to look at. I think something like woodcutting gets poked at a lot, where like once you get to teaks, you never need a single tree again, right? Above teaks. And that kind of feels like a bit of a missed opportunity, if you know what I mean.
For sure. I mean, okay, so regarding the feel of the skill, this first topic was something on Reddit, and the question is, how much incentive will there be to sail with friends on the same boat? And obviously I talked to Elena about this, and it does sound like, well, I'll let you guys go for it, and then I'll add some thoughts at the end.
Yeah, I think my take on this is that we don't want to make it, or at least I personally don't want to make it the meta that you need to be sailing with friends. And so it's kind of difficult to really incentivize in that sense. We want to make sure that you're not disincentivized at the very least. We want to make sure that you can go out and reasonably train sailing with your friends, and you're not hindering yourself too much. You're not quartering your XP rates. So we want that to be a viable option. But as I personally see it, I kind of just want the incentive of sailing with friends to be sailing with friends, to be that sort of social side of it. And obviously, that will take certain people's fancy, and other people will just not care too much. But I think it'd be a really rough place to be if you're missing out on the top XP if you've just not got friends to go sailing with.
Yeah, I generally agree. Like, there's nothing stopping you going out and salvaging with your friends, whether you've all got your own individual boats or you're all on the same boat. Obviously, like cargo hold space is a limitation, but if you weren't keeping the sort of salvage that you were getting anyway, it kind of doesn't matter. And we've purposely made sure that like salvaging isn't an activity. Like it's not like old chopping trees, where it's like a 1 in 8 to chop the log. It's more like shooting stars, where like the more people that add to it, it's still capped at how quickly it can deplete. So 2 people salvaging isn't going to deplete it any faster than 1 person. So we've been trying to do things like that. But in general, like skills are always an expression of the individual like player character's ability to do something. And it would like we definitely would want to avoid the situation where you're just leeching on someone's boat and while they're doing high XP things and you're not getting it. Or if the meta was to like use someone else's high level boat. We're definitely like concerned like boosting stuff, but I mean Barracuda trials make sense to be solo. They're very much designed to be solo challenges. Port tasks had lots of problems where like how can you identify whose like cargo is whose, and do people just have their boat set up at docks and saying selling crate of bass this much and you hand it in to get the XP? I know like that is like players might find that fun, but like
Yeah.
if the meta to sailing was just to be at the port and buy cargo from people, it doesn't really sound like very compelling, right? So yeah, I think like shipwreck salvage is the only thing you'll really be able to do, but we're very open to like, as we introduce more sailing activities at sea, like, you know, some of the combat activities, it's fine if like, you know, the player crew that can operate the boat much better than say one person and trying to control like their crewmates and stuff can get better like kills per hour a boss or something, or get more loot per hour. I think that just makes a lot of sense, right? You sail with the boys for the rewards that you get, but like XP is mostly focused around the solo experience, is kind of philosophy we have right now.
Yeah, that makes sense, because it does feel like an extremely hard thing to balance. In my head, I want to log in, and this is my kind of like ideal vision. And again, it's so much of it is just wrapped up in fantasy. I remember talking with BC Guppy in the early days of the cast, just imagining what sailing could bring. And, you know, you're just thinking of all the cool things. And then you actually see like all the hindrances with the engine and everything, and like, you know, the balancing and whatnot. But in my head, still to this day, I would just love to log in and almost form like sort of like a, you know, what would be considered like a TOB party or something. You go to like the little sign at the port, and you just sign up with your friends, and you're locked into this thing, and then you go on these sailing adventures where you go to new islands, and you maybe have to drop off some stuff, but you're all on the same boat, and you're kind of locked in, which might, you know, make it so there's not as much leeching, because you kind of all have to be a part of it. But just one of you is going to be controlling the ship, and the other of you can be on the cannon or whatever, just messing around. And that in my head just sounds so much more fun. And I think it's also like that kind of 2025 feel where there's not as much focus on quote unquote integrity. I mean, obviously there still is integrity of this game, but like it's definitely not as strong as it used to be, that sort of sentiment towards skilling. And I think there's something that might be missed, at least in my head, of just feeling like sailing for so many people is like, okay, well, solo's the only really way to train this quickly, and so I'm just gonna do these basic salvaging until, you know, or just do Barracuda trials by myself until 99, and then at that point it's like, oh well, now I can just sail and have some fun with the boys, but at that point I'd rather just do TOB or whatever. And I think, at least in my head, there is sort of this missed opportunity where it would be fun if you do have the friends to be able to get a reasonable amount of XP, you know, upward of 80 to 90% of what you could get. But I see obviously the downsides of, what about alting? You know, you just throw all your alts on a boat and you just kind of have a solo experience, and then these guys all get passive 99 sailing without doing much. And I can see that being an issue, but I don't know. It's just it's such a hard thing with a massive skill like this and trying to balance it properly. Have you guys considered at all, like, will there be the possibility of somebody truly trying to have an all-friend experience to the way to 99, and that being a viable training method? Like, all they want to do is just be on a boat with their friends the whole time. Is that going to even be a possibility, or do you really see this skill as being like, nah, we're really going to try to focus it on a solo experience for a lot of it?
I would say solo is probably expected. The only way a group could really do it is if they like went around just salvaging everything together, because you can do that on the same boat. Multiple people can use the same hook, and then like I think like there's nothing really stopping you from like charting as a group, as long as everyone had the base level to chart it. Like that could be a fun thing to do, where like we all salvaged as a group, got to level 20, and now we're all gonna, you know, you're controlling the boat and I'm keeping an eye out for like this thing to chart. Those are things that you could do together. But charting is very much like it's like technically solo, but like I don't think there's anything stopping you doing it on someone else's boat. I might have to double check that. But in general, the only thing we want to prevent with charting is like, we didn't want, you know, your friend to sail you to say like over to the Elven lands where there's like a high level thing to chart, and then you just, you know, from level 1 get like a 10k XP drop, and suddenly you're like, what would that even be? That'd be like level 20 something, 26, 27. You know, we want to avoid that, so that's why there's like a minimum level on charting stuff. But like, as long as you and your friends all like were like the same level, you could technically do charting together.
Lenny, anything to add?
Yeah, I think Husky's nailed it pretty well. I think on the whole, it's something that, you know, is it going to be optimal? probably not, but you know, I can definitely see there being a fun YouTube series, whatever of it, of someone who's only doing it socially, only doing it with friends. They got a 5-man crew at all times. I think, you know, it's really cool to keep the options open there, but it's going to be difficult to make it optimal and competitive.
Yeah. Okay, here's a question. Will there be any UIM specific considerations / limitations being made for sailing features?
I think the biggest one is that's up in the air right now is the cargo hold. Right now, it's like on a whitelist of things you can store at it, and it's like if they can store fish there, for example, is that like okay? That's probably okay, or like things they can salvage. But like we're trying to be aware of that. But outside of like the cargo hold stuff, it's mostly just being aware that like when building things in the boat, I know I've tried to be very careful when start designing what you need to build each facility that we're not going into like 27, 28 inventory slots required to build it for most accounts because, they'll probably have a looting bag, a seed box, all that kind of thing. It's just small things like that, really. I don't know, is there anything you've had to think about, Lenny, in regards to Ultimate Iron Man?
No, there's nothing really that I've encountered that I've had to deal with for it. I think it's, the question of are there any considerations is probably just like straight up a yes. We're at least considering what can they do with the cargo hold. It's something that we don't want to just blindside us, and we've introduced a new storage system, not considered whether or not Ultimate Iron Man can use it, and so by default they just can. We do need to make those considerations. What way they go is a different question. But yeah, I think Husky's kind of covered it pretty well.
We have Nin on the team as well. Like he's actively in sailing stuff, so I feel like if we had any like Ultimate Iron Man red flags, like he's definitely the sort of person who would just tell us straight up. So
he's a great addition to the team. It seems like. I mean, maining a UIM is just crazy. First off, but to be also involved in the engine directly is cool.
I've seen that man playing the game with a bank, and he doesn't know what to do with himself. He gets so lost when he's got a bank at his hands.
I mean, he does have a bank in his hands. What are you talking about? No. Yeah. No, it's definitely an interesting way to play. But okay, cool. So it sounds like for the most part, things will be able to function pretty much properly. There'll probably be a few instances where it's going to just be a little bit rougher for a UIM, but cool. What will be considered dangerous on the sea for hardcores?
In general, the go-to answer I've given on like some of our Discord stages and stuff is like if your boat capsizes, that isn't dangerous. Basically, it's like you'll wash up at shore with 1 hit point. So I don't know. Make sure you're not poisoned before your boat capsizes or something. Maybe there's a potential risk there, but obviously a player would know if you're poisoned. We're not just going to poison them like, as their boat capsizes.
You could poison them. Just do it for fun.
Or if there was content that was like, at risk of getting poisoned at any moment, like that's part of just player knowledge as a whole to be like, okay, my boat could capsize, I could be poisoned. Maybe I want to make sure I'm running a super anti, right?
Yeah, perpetually.
But in general, that won't be considered a dangerous death. We consider it as like, your boat has suffered the loss. But if like there was a creature that the classic example is like a pirate jumped on your boat and stabbed you and your hit points reached 0. That would be considered a dangerous death. But I wouldn't worry just generally sailing your boat around and dying. Like there might be a couple of things here or there that like do damage the player, but we're not just going to be like, you suddenly like hit something and your player takes like 80 damage and gets 1 shot and dies. That sounds like that might just not be very fun from a gameplay experience, whether you're a hardcore or not. But obviously, like I'll preface it with hardcores should usually be careful with any new update that comes into the game, right?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, I think like Husky points out, there's a sort of clear distinction between your boat capsizing and that, not killing a hardcore versus you could just die on your boat by whatever means. You can still just die and that's not going to be safe. That will count as a death. Obviously, you saw in the alpha there was a sort of troll that could come along and attack you when you do certain things. There's sort of been conversations we've been having recently about when you're fighting monsters out at sea, do they all just attack your boat or do any of them attack you personally? Probably not just going to throw you quite into the dangerous deep end, but there's, definitely possibilities there of things that can just hurt and kill you on your boat.
Okay, yeah, that sounds good enough for me. So it sounds pretty tame for a hardcore. Obviously, if you're gonna start fighting some stuff, there's gonna be some potential risk. But capsizing is guaranteed not a dangerous death. It's gonna be like drowning underneath Fossil Island. Sounds like.
Yeah, I think that's a good comparison. Like, I definitely saw people like because we had on the alpha the 10 HP like accounts as the standard, right? They were like level 3s.
Mhm.
People would just like, oh, I'm gonna mirror at the Isle of Bones, and what the hell? There's level 46 skeleton, and now I'm dead, right? Like there's levels of like, you can kind of see like at a glance like what's on the island, like probably, but yeah, like I'm not gonna say sailing's gonna be safe, but we're probably not gonna have large one shots out of nowhere.
So, question actually about boarding islands and stuff. It sounded like that was one of the gripes with the alpha was people had this expectation that they could just kind of pull up to any part of the island and just get off their boat, but there was like dedicated points of interest that you could actually dock, and everywhere else you just couldn't get off. Is that something you guys are considering, having more docking stations, or just being able to get off your boat at any point as long as you're near land? How's that going to work?
So I think just letting you, get off your boat at any place you want, not something that we're looking at. I think there's far too much sort of unknown there. If we go and let you get off your boat at Tutorial Island or just on some random coastline behind some quests that you've not unlocked, there's a lot of problems there. And it's also just a very technically complex challenge to sort of let you get off wherever you want, get back on there. I think we have, since the alpha started, having some more conversations about needing to be clear about what you can do at different places that you can get off your boat. People were having sort of problems that they disembarked where, they've got a mooring point, and then because that's where their boat was last docked, they kind of, got stuck with it being rescued to that location, not being able to get back there, and they've got to go through the whole sort of rigmarole of getting it, seen to by the port wizards and brought back to Port Sarum or wherever it might be. So there's a few things there for us to be conscious of and sort of keep playing around with.
Yeah,
Okay.
definitely. I think as a whole, like it's just much safer for us to intentionally go, you can dock here. Then we go, okay, you're docking here. What are the checks level wise, quest wise? Actual like, the obvious one is like, could I just get off somewhere in I want to say Taranwen. It's not called Taranwen. There's an actual name for it, but you know what I mean. Like over at Elflands, right?
Mhm.
Like without doing the quest. Obviously, Underground Pass is a physical barrier that's existed for most accounts. But in general, like even post launch, if there's places where players be like, "Oh, it'd be nice if we could dock at this place instead," that isn't, like prifted as, we could potentially open that up like on a case by case basis, right? It's just much safer to add things one at a time than just saying blanket rule like, hey, yeah, players can dock everywhere. By the way, QA, go now spend like the next 6 months trying to find all the things that break that we haven't caught. Right? It doesn't sound very efficient for one thing for development, and second of all, I don't see much of the player need for it. And
Okay.
I think it also adds like a lot of meaning to like having like unlocked a place to dock somewhere. Oh, cool! Now I can do this. Now I can go do that instead of just free like no levels dock wherever you want.
True. What about shooting enemies when you're on your boat and they're on the coastline, like the hobgoblins? Can you do that anywhere, or is that going to just be a separate thing? I guess like a separate landmass.
Yeah, I mean, I've been taking on the work recently to sort of see whether or not we can just let you shoot your bow and arrow off your boat, and I'm going to tentatively say the answer is yes. Hopefully, you can. There's still some exploration to be done there. However, doing that to things that are on the shore is maybe a little riskier. I think we sort of discussed that we kind of want probably a white list of NPCs that you can engage in combat with from a boat, and make sure that people aren't going to be pulling around to something that they absolutely aren't meant to be able to safe spot, that they're going to get some unintended benefit from being able to kill from an unintended location. We've got 20 years of game history to worry about there. It's always going to be a lot safer for us to kind of go about whitelisting these things rather than just saying, yeah, we'll just let you do it wherever you want. So whether or not you'll be able to shoot things on land with your bow and arrow like that, I'm not too sure, but generally just traditional combat from a boat is something that we're looking at.
Okay. This is obviously, I don't know if you guys have this figured out or this will be toward the end. What perks will the 99 sailing cape have?
I would say it's like undecided right now. Like the obvious one to float around is like, oh, it gives you a teleport to a location, which is like the go-to. It feels like for a lot of capes, right? Like a meaningful location. That could be like a reasonable fallback. In like an idealistic sense, I'd love like if there was like some small perk or XP boost that like you can get at 99 to like help the people going to 200 mil, but like you want that to be meaningful and like not in a way that's like I love it and hate it at the same time. That like the runecraft perk, for example, like gives you pouches. Like that's like quite a large XP per hour, but it's also like, you know, there's some people who would argue that like that's like that's such a strong perk to leave so late. So I wonder if there is something cool and flavorful we could do, but like it's safer just to say like we haven't really designed it. We'll probably like evaluate that like right near the end when we have the full scope of everything, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Like when we know
Yeah.
what the metas are.
It's something that, yeah, I think we'll very much kind of get a better sense of as we spend more time ourselves doing sort of longevity testing, where, you know, we're actually playing through the full 1 to 99 journey, not just a sort of short segment of it, but seeing the full picture of the skill from start to finish. Because, you know, when skill cape perks were first introduced, you'd had a long time to sort of see, okay, what are the gripes with this skill? What are the nice just little sort of quality of life boosts that you can add to that skill cape? And we're not necessarily there yet. There's a lot of things that it might think, okay, yeah, we could add this as a nice little perk, but maybe that should just be part of the skill from the get-go. That should be part of the progression. And yeah, there's a lot of time for us to still kind of learn on what the pain points are, what's going to make sense as, you know, a level 99 unlock.
That's what we need to do, like the call to arms, right? Like, you know, viewers, if you got any cool ideas for the sailing park, leave them in the comments below. While you're there, smash a like, give a subscribe. You know, is that the YouTuber thing?
Yeah, exactly. Okay, here. Well, what about this? What about pets? Because with a lot of skills, you know, you think of woodcutting, or actually, I guess woodcutting now has forestry pets and stuff, but I think they're transmogs to beavers. But it's just like you do any woodcutting and you have a chance of a woodcutting pet, which is the beaver. Will sailing be more like hunter, where, oh, you have an herbivore pet and you have a chin pet, and you can't just get these pets from doing any sort of hunter. These are specific. So I wonder, will there be like a Barracuda Trials pet? And will there be a salvaging pet, or will there just be a generic sailing pet? Where would you guys want to see the pets land? And have you guys decided anything?
I think personally, I'd like to see it as just a global sailing pet. I think, you know, as it goes on into the future and more content gets added to sailing over time, there might be sort of scope for more niche pets for specific activities. But I think, you know, releasing the skill in the first place and saying, oh, well, actually, it's not just one pet, but 3 different pets, would just feel a little strange to me. Obviously, it's, you know, not foreign to the skills that we've got in game already. It's a precedent that we've already set, but I don't know, it just doesn't quite sit right with me.
Yeah, I think the only activity that could arguably get away with it is Barracuda Trials, because I think more and more throughout development, it's like taking on the identity of like sailing's minigame, if that makes sense. Like, it just is like with like having like, you know, the like I guess like it just keeps getting compared to Sepulcher, and while like we were looking for something that wasn't quite as minigamey with initial designs, they just fell through, and then we ended up going with this instead, and you know everyone seems to like this. So I could see the argument there, but I would say like we don't have plans to. We're also planning to hopefully have the community weigh in on what the pet should be. I don't know the full plans of that off the top of my head, but I know that's something that the team has floated around a lot. So that could be quite cool, because I know there's a whole host of creatures that like people have like said could be really fun. You know, people like, oh, I want like a dolphin pet to like sail behind my boat, or to like swim behind my boat. Like crab pet comes up a lot. I've seen otter thrown around, seal. Like there's so many like cool sea animals that like could just make a cool pet. But yeah, I wouldn't say we've got like concrete plans around it yet, apart from knowing that we would like one for sailing.
You know what I think would be cool is if somehow you allowed like the flying, but like the pets that have that fly behind you. It'd be cool if you could almost, if you have it following you while you're on your boat, it actually goes like higher up in the sky. So like the heron's like way up there, just like coasting behind your boat, basically. I don't know. That'd be kind of charming. or like a pet Kriara just way up there. As long as you're on your boat, obviously, so it's not just following you like in your boat as like an NPC. It's just like way up there, similar to like the dolphin vibe. That'd be kind of cool.
Yeah, the other thing that's kind of come up and been floated around is the question of whether or not we could theoretically have pets following the boat itself. So, not following you around on the boat, but, whatever bird it might be flying behind
Yep.
the boat as a whole. And I think that's definitely something, it's a really cool idea to explore, especially when it comes to whatever a sailing pet might look like.
So this was something I brought up with Mod Nin, who probably obviously has a better grasp on, what's actually possible with the engine. And that was like water animations. Currently right now, and again, like if you guys don't have much to say on this, that's totally understandable. But water animations, I feel like would do such a good job of making it feel like you're, actually on water. Right now, it's just like you're kind of floating on this blue carpet. Have you guys... Do you guys like personally see an issue with like what we currently have right now, and could you see like sailing genuinely being improved just through aesthetics alone, like having like a trail of water behind your boat? And also, like, how difficult is that? Because it sounds like Mod Nin is just like, this is gonna be very difficult because this is like something we've never really done in the game, where like land is kind of being elevated in a way, like a water trail or something being elevated might be a kind of difficult.
Yeah, I mean, Nin's definitely the person that can talk to, how technically possible it is or not. But I think it's a really interesting area to explore. And people that sort of saw some of the earlier videos and GIFs that we had out of the sort of first draft of sailing will have seen that at that point we did have sort of wobbling water. And it didn't look polished. It was, a flat sheet of water that was just kind of tilting back and forth. And we decided to pull that back and not push that forwards in the current version because it just didn't look quite right. It didn't feel good. But it's definitely something that we want to keep exploring still, especially when it comes to our sort of new clients offerings with HD in the future. There's a huge sort of space there for us to find cool new things to do with it that are a little bit over my head.
Right.
Yeah, I definitely think there's things we can do as well. Like, I'm open to the whole wake idea if it looks okay. Like, the problem is always like, does it render okay with the boat and stuff? But I'd love the idea of like the wake in Barracuda Trials, like indicating how many like whirlpool boosts you have, if that makes sense, or like that I've reached my top speed. I think those are like really cool ideas. But like, it is just like we're exploring it right now. Probably couldn't make promises.
Yeah.
Java client specifically is very limiting on that end.
Are you guys thinking that the HD version will have kind of like this sort of transparent water kind of going on, where you can kind of see the shoreline like ease into the water? Is that kind of the plan? I know you're not obviously involved in that team, but is that kind of like where we're headed?
I don't know how much I can speak to whether or not that's the plan, but it's definitely something that I'd like to see personally.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'd say the same. I think it's speculation even on our end. Obviously, like as you mentioned, it's a different team that's working on it. I think something that can help though, as a whole, that like isn't necessarily apparent right now, is that the sea is still getting fleshed out. If you know what I mean. So like the blue carpet is only really jarring when it's like a full like 64 by 64 map square of like blue carpet and nothing else. But there can be things like creatures, rocks, other things that like those will naturally break it up, just like trees break up the current world, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it definitely won't be as bad, but I'm aware that like the texture is it definitely like offends some people in the community.
Yeah, I mean, I think on that note, just adding the few different colours of the texture, having a few different sort of shades of blue for different depths of water, did a lot to sort of help with the visual variance there. I think that was a really nice change. Not the sort of smoothest thing right now, but something that we're going to sort of keep pushing at and seeing what we can best do with, sort of the limitations of the Java non-HD offering.
Yeah. And we got a lot of feedback about that in the survey. I know there were very specific questions in the survey asking about that, and I know those have been forwarded to the art team for like constant review and seeing like what are there any other ideas they can do with the tools they have?
Yep. So I don't know if you guys follow Jimmy on YouTube, but he made a video reviewing his experience with sailing. And one of the things he loved the absolute most was this feeling of exploration, of really just going out, sailing somewhere far and finding an island. And one of the things that, kind of, it just, I guess, is an issue is that this really is only an experience that can be experienced once per island, obviously. And I don't think the team is planning on having like randomly generated instances where things can just spawn in and you've seen an island that nobody's ever seen before because it's randomly generated. But that was his favorite part, and I think that speaks to a lot of people as well, is just that initial feeling of landing on a new island that you've never explored. And obviously in other video games, that's just a really exciting element of any game. I remember playing Elden Ring and just going around and just finding random caves and random stuff that like it felt like might have been missed by most players. And I just wonder how big of a obviously this is let me just ask this, like, are you guys kind of focused on that Easter egg element where there's just going to be so many hidden things, maybe just treasure maps and little fun things to do and chests that can't be opened until you've done something else on certain islands to keep that sort of exploration alive?
Yeah, I think so. I think we've got certain people that are working on the very core of the skill. How does sailing itself as a skill work? And other people that are sort of exploring more the world building around it, the narrative involved. And there's a lot more that we're going to sort of look to do there over time. I think in particular, we've kind of got it scoped out that at some point, me and Moded just have a bit of capacity to just kind of do our silly things together and put a few things in that sort of bring places to life. That you sort of touched on the procedurally generated side of things. And I saw a comment on that video that you were talking about that I think really rings true, which is that, procedurally generated areas of whatever description can be really cool. They can be a really sort of awesome feature in gameplay, but that they don't quite tick that same feeling of exploration off because, what makes it so satisfying to see these little islands and caves and whatever it might be for the first time is the fact that they're all handcrafted. They've all got some personality to them. And there's only so far that you can sort of take that with procedurally generated content.
That's a good point.
It's something that I would love to do a lot more with procedurally generated content. I sort of did it first back with the Gauntlet years ago now, and people might have seen there was a game jam pitch that I put together a year or two ago at this point, dealing with procedurally generated underwater caverns. But it's all about finding, how do we actually apply that to the game? The tech's cool. It's cool that you can have these randomly generated places to explore, but what actually compels players to go there? And yeah, that's hard to do just for the value of exploration itself when they're not going to have that handcrafted touch.
Yeah, that's actually a great point. So, but do you guys focus, will you guys focus after sailing drops to continue to drop more islands and stuff? Not as obviously a huge update like Zaya or Varlamore, but just kind of like off the cuff. Hey, we just dropped 3 new little islands. Go explore them on a random update. Is that going to be on the docket, you think?
There's definitely plans to look at stuff like that, and especially once the skill is launched, there's a lot of like potential for a team to just be assigned, hey, you're doing a new piece of content, and like these days it can be like, okay, cool, you're doing like Varlamore, which is obviously something massive, but even like in the past we've done like a Prif, we've done a Dark Mare. I could see a team being assigned, hey, you're gonna do this. The brief that we've got is to develop a really cool, interesting place out at sea, and a team does that, and obviously once the sailing skill has launched, like that opens the door for that team to do that. I think one of the challenges from an expectation perspective from sailing is that like when you ask people, oh, would it be cool for X to be at sea or for Y to be at sea or to be able to do this? And I could probably fill up a backlog of ideas of those that would, we still wouldn't be able to deliver it by 2030, right? There's a lot of cool ideas at sea. And the problem is like the team's the problem is like we can't satisfy everything. The team's like main goal and number one goal and priority is to deliver the sailing skill. That is like the important thing to remember is that we're not necessarily like saying, hey, like here's these random meaningless things you can do to make number go up. But cool, here's these islands, they're the main content. It's like, no, it's actually kind of the opposite, right? Like it's actually about making sure there's engaging trading methods and delivering a 2025 skill. And then as an extra, here are these other things with the expectation that more stuff will come with time. But like we've had this eternal balance, like internally, where like we'll agree something is an amazing idea, and we're not selecting like, cool, like we've got a couple of good ideas and some okay ones. We're literally splitting the hairs of like everyone's got amazing ideas of things that the team really would like to do, but as I mentioned, we can't do them all. So we're deciding between which 3 or 4 amazing ideas are we doing, right?
Yeah.
Which means that like that's really exciting for the future. There's a lot of really cool things that can build off it, and we're excited to do that. But like we really are trying to deliver sailing the skill, if that makes sense. With the expectation that there has to be elements of like exploration, there has to be elements of like gameplay at sea. I think that's like the big compelling thing for me, is that like we don't just want you to be like, cool, here's all these little small places to explore, but here's the training methods and then nothing else. Like part of the thing for me that like the alpha kind of missed, because it was all about just the training methods, the islands were just kind of a teaser to that, is that it should be a thing where a player will just sit down with their friends and just go, hey, do you fancy doing this piece of content at sea today? Whether that's like, you know, whatever activity that is. I can't really go into spoilers and stuff, right? But the idea that like, it just being on the sea and doing stuff is a new method of playing the game, right? People keep thinking about like skills as the like a sailing as, oh, it's just this thing I need to do to get to the actual reward. But what if the actual reward was doing the things? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's kind of hard to explain because I'm being conceptual, I'm intentionally being vague, but like, yeah, it's really difficult. But we saw the video, and for people who love exploration, sailing will have cool things to explore, and the novelty does wear off once. But like, as we kind of talked, everybody wants different things from a skill. Everyone, like, I saw a Reddit post that was an interesting read. I won't say I agreed with all of it, but it said something like, "Why are we holding sailing to minigame standards?" But then complaining that it feels like a mini game, right? It's something along those lines. And that topic was interesting because it's like, it's because like one person isn't doing both. It's because we've got different camps of people who all want different things, and one person really wants sailing because they just love the vibe of being a pirate. And they just want to go be a pirate and shoot things with cannons, and that's enough of a win for them. And another person is like really looking forward to having a new like skill to grind or train on the side. Another person's just like, I can't be done with this at all. I just want to get my max cape back and be done. So it's like you've got so many people viewing this content so differently. And I've gone this massive big tangent here, but like that's kind of the problem, right? Is that like we could try to be split each way, every way, try to please everybody, and we just keep coming back to, no, we need to deliver sailing the skill. There's a lot of potential that can be built on after that, and it's really exciting. If that makes sense.
That's a great point. Yeah, that was actually something I tried to bring up earlier. I just didn't have the words for it. But yeah, I think that was the post I was actually referring to. It was like these certain people on Reddit that, you know, the post blows up talking about like the mini game feel, and then like what are we actually wanting sailing to be? And I think you nailed it right there. So this question is going to be obviously in the engine team, but I am just curious because Modnin did say there is just so much customization with the speeds of boats, which really got me excited because I thought there was definitely going to be some sort of like limitations with, okay, well, boats actually can't go much faster than what they already are on the alpha, but they were, I mean, he was saying like these boats technically could go up to like 10 tiles every tick if we really wanted, which would just feel weird. But that got me excited because my main gripe with the sailing alpha was just how sluggish everything felt. And I think that's just because I think those initial log boats only move like 1.5 tiles per tick. So it's genuinely slower than running if you don't have a gust of wind. And that was my biggest gripe. And then the second biggest gripe was just the feeling of claustrophobia. Like it felt like I couldn't see far enough. It felt like I was getting disoriented, where am I exactly? Like I obviously know this map. I know where I'm kind of near Karamja sort of, but like this is confusing and I just couldn't see far enough. And I wonder, do you guys feel the same? Obviously this is engine related. It's not your team working on it directly, but with the speeds of boats, will we get faster boats as we level up? Will there be faster boats in general on the open sea versus toward more land masses? And then obviously just how far you can actually see with render distance.
I actually wanted boats to be slower, if you can believe that.
That's crazy.
Initially at launch,
yeah,
which is crazy. But like you said that like there's this feeling of like, God, I don't really know where I am, and that only gets exacerbated the faster you go. Now I'm not saying like 1.5 tiles a tick is the problem, right? It wasn't at all. But like the reason I want you to be slower is because it really is that feeling of like, how pathetic does it feel when you're chopping a tree with a bronze axe? Like, you probably didn't do it because efficient Iron Man strategies, right? Say, go get a steel one first.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, like, there's an amount of granularity there, but the story we're kind of hoping, like, or not the story, but the player journey that a player will experience with sailing is like, it's fine that you're slower than running at first because, like, can you remember the first time you got behind the wheel of a car?
Yes,
and
I
how
can.
jarring that was to you and how terrible you were. And now, like, you didn't think about it. It's second nature, right?
Yeah.
Your player isn't like, your player might be the person who's like slayed Verzik 10,000 times and beaten all of the calamities, but they've never handled a boat before. And I think that's really important. Is like everyone is a level 1 sailor, so they're probably going to be equally about as bad as each other. And that will hopefully like that will alleviate over time, right? Like, not only will your character be getting access to better tools because your level went up, you'll be getting better at sailing as a whole, right? Like understanding the turning arcs and the timings and stuff. The short answer is yes, boats will get faster. There is a point where speed gets silly, though. I don't want to give a number because I don't know what we'll go for launch, and we might get tech to resolve that. But there was a point where, like, if you can imagine, like, you have to load in the map, right? When you get close enough to the black border. I don't really like streamlines that to an extent. Now imagine hitting that at, let's say, 10 tiles, which is like a stupid number that like Nin gave you. Every 6 ticks, you hit a loading barrier, right? Could you imagine what that would feel like to sail? That would be horrible, right? Not only that, but you've also got like every 1 tick, you've got like 10 tiles of things that loaded in for you to evaluate. Do you know what I mean?
Yep,
Like it
yep.
obviously if that's just open sea, so obviously 10 tiles is a silly, stupid number. The actual number we had the problem was quite a bit lower than that. But yeah, in general, you will go faster as you sail. It's going to be tied to your hull tier, like in strength. So basically, like, the better your hull is, the better it's cutting through the water. Kind of is the idea. And the reason it's not sails is because sails are doing an awful lot right now. So we're kind of just trying to keep things like each like core facility, like hull, helm, sails, and keel. That's almost a tongue twister. All kind of do something different. But yes, you will be able to move faster. You will, at some point, like not very far into sailing's journey, you will be going faster than run speed, or that is a thing we're exploring, and it does feel good. Especially like Barracuda trials and stuff related. Like, it does a lot to increase your movement speed through mechanics and stuff. And even on top of your boat speed, we'd like to move some of those mechanics outside of Barracuda trials. Like there's just a few more rapids generally. Like, imagine like going from Pandemonium to Port Sarim, and there's like a couple of rapids you can do that, if you're paying attention to the journey and the route, like you can take advantage of that. But if you just want to AFK, sort of set yourself in a direction and come back to your computer like 30 seconds time, or you're changing something, like, yeah, you're maybe not going to gain the benefit of them, or blah blah. But there's a whole amount to that. We saw a bunch of feedback to potentially tie that stuff to charting. If I charted the entirety of Port Sarim, I get access to a few speed boost things. Those things are things we're still considering, but the short answer is yes, you'll be going faster. But we are aware that there is a problem with going too fast, just in terms of like how the gameplay feels.
For sure.
Yeah, and I think on the side on the side of the sort of claustrophobia and getting disoriented out at sea, I think that's something that in part I expect will just change over time. You think back to first playing RuneScape back in the day, and you'd have had no idea where you're going, just walking between, Camelot and Ardy.
That's a good point.
Whereas now, you know that map like the back of your hand, and it's kind of interesting that it feels so strange that you'll know the shoreline like the back of your hand already. You know your way all around Port Sarim, but as soon as you're just on the water going around the outside of it, it feels just like a different world. And I think people will very quickly sort of get to grips with the sea in a way that the sort of time that they were playing the Alpha 4 probably didn't allow for. it's definitely something for us to pay attention to and see what we can do to sort of alleviate that and help it. But at the same time, maybe that's just part of sailing. It's you're meant to be learning to navigate the sea. So if you need a map to help you out, maybe that's just how it is. Maybe that's sailing.
Yeah. No,
Right.
I mean, the biggest thing was it just felt a little bit weird not being able to see just really far. It just felt off. It just, with other games, it just feels like you can just see so much farther away. And there is this sense of like, I don't know, just more of a sense of like freedom and just like, okay, I can breathe. It's just weird when like with the engine we're working with, it just loads up chunks. So like not even that far away, honestly. It's just I think that would go a long way. And Modern In even was saying like this is easily a possibility. It's just getting it in there. And then he even said it's a possibility to even load up like NPCs and players far away. There'll obviously be some problems in Wilderness, and he's not making any statement that that'll ever come into the game, but it's easily possible. They've done it with fight caves and things.
Yeah, it's absolutely something that we should be experimenting with, and seeing what we can do to make that feel better. Because you're definitely right that especially if we do start looking at higher speed boats, you're just going to be running into that a lot quicker, like Husky says.
It is like dual like responsibility though. Like he could be responsible for providing cool tech or like solutions to problems, but we're like responsible for like the actual like building the content around the tech, if that makes sense. Like if he doesn't enable it, we need to be careful to curate our content in a way that doesn't feel bad. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because we're mindful of like, we can't just go, oh well, it's look, we made you go super fast, but like now there's this massive problem that becomes a glaring issue, right? Like that would just be really irresponsible of us, right? Because in a sort of way, that's us saying, hey, Modern In, you go fix it. It's your problem now, right? That's just not how that works, right?
Yeah. Okay, here's a question from Reddit. How many styles/themes of ships will be available at launch?
I would say that like we're predominantly going with like the Kandarin style right now, which is the boats you've seen. We have one more that we didn't show in the alpha, and we're considering additional ones beyond that. It's more for like it sounds really cool to have a bunch of different styles of boats, and we would love to explore like in the future, what does a Fremennik style of boat look like, an Elven style, a Gnome style, a Dwarven style. But it would be very easy to we've got to strike that balance between we want a number of boats that feel good to unlock, but at the same time we want to make sure that we're not just like adding a lot of dead weight to it. Like we want to make sure that there's an actual content reason for you to need this boat over that boat, but also not make a bunch of other boats redundant, right? So as with most things in our game, like we're trying to make sure that like everything has like its nice little place, and I would say that like that stuff we're still exploring for now is like probably the best way to answer that. I've definitely got designs for what all these different styles of boats could do, but they were made a while ago, and I might look at these designs in like a month's time or look back on them and go, actually, I don't think that mechanic works very well now, based on what sailing is now. If that makes sense.
Yeah, and I think it also, to some extent, this depends on what people are actually considering as different styles and themes. We've got our idea of, we're looking at Kandarin boats now, and there might be different sorts in the future. It might be Fremennik, Dwarven, whatever it might be. And there's sort of different sizes of these boats as well. But we've also got a lot more customization available within each of those types of boats. So, just because you've got a Kandarin small boat, that doesn't mean it's going to look the same as someone else's. You have a different hull that makes it look different. And one thing that I'm personally very conscious of, and I was sort of having a conversation with Husky about this recently, is I want to make sure that we don't just fall into the trap of there being a single optimal layout for a boat. I don't want everyone to feel like they need to have the exact same facilities in the exact same places. I want there to be a choice there. I want you to sort of customize and personalize your boat, so that even with the same layout, you'll see them all around at sea, and they'll just look a little bit different from each other.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. Will there be further customization beyond themes? So, for example, in construction, you can really go to town and pay a lot of money for some cool looking facilities. Well, I guess not facilities in your POH, just like furniture and stuff. But will there still be that same sort of element of like, on the lines of like a Priff Crown that people spend 250 million on? I mean, will we really be able to pimp out our boats and flex how much money we spent on these?
I'm a massive fan of the biggest and best boats and being ludicrously expensive, like to the point where like, there's just stupid things where you can look at and go, damn, that guy is wealthy, right?
Yeah,
like I'm
yeah.
a big fan of that.
Was wealthy.
What? Oh, sorry. Yeah, maybe they still are. Maybe.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm a big fan of this kind of thing. I think that sort of expression is really cool in the game. I think I just couldn't tell you what shape that takes right now. It's like I'd say we're getting closer to those kind of decisions like now, but it is just still one of those things where, like we still need to agree on specifics in the team, I guess would be the best way to put it, because we all have different ideas for how that could be done.
And it doesn't need to be on launch either. This is be something way in the future where you just add little things like, oh, do you really want to look like a beast? Well, get this obsidian helm on your ship, something like that. So.
Yeah, I think that boat customization is absolutely one of the sort of clearest paths for future content in sailing. Obviously, there's going to be a lot more that we'll want to do, but it's going to be so easy to say, you've got this cool new feat in game, you unlock something, you can build a facility with it. That's like such a huge space for upgrades. In the same way as things came to the player in house later on, you've got the golden sink, you've got the stack of cash, the Priff Crowns obviously didn't exist for years. All these things can come later for sure, and I think it's nice to sort of set out the space for it now, but not need to worry about necessarily filling all of it just yet.
Yeah, a lot of our work has been making sure the systems are there, making sure it's as easy to do as possible. Like, I know that we were very lucky that Ash spent a lot of time making POH much nicer than it was, and there's always constant improvements we're making to that. We have the benefit of hindsight with what it takes to make the system really easy to plug into, to the extent where, like, I don't know, maybe at some point the league's team end up coming along and they're like, hey, you can get this cool flag as like an ornament kit from your league, right? Like, it would just be something that people could just plug into really easy as long as they had the asset made for it. And that's like definitely been our goal with these systems.
Yeah.
Put it more so on like, as long as art have the time to give us the thing, we can do it, as opposed to like a dev having to, worry about like being able to implement it in the first place.
Do you guys imagine that the Trouble Brewing outfits will give any sort of buff to sailing, maybe act as a sailing outfit with 2.5% XP with the full set? Or are you guys kind of like straying away from that?
I don't think it's a conversation that's really come up a whole lot internally, or at least it's not one that I've been involved in. I think my personal take on it is that I wouldn't want that to be, quote unquote, the sailing skilling outfit, because you don't gain it through sailing. Obviously, I know there's a case there with the lumberjack outfit that's gained through through temple trekking. That's not exactly woodcutting, but for the most part, we kind of set this precedent that you're doing a much more related activity to unlock these outfits. Obviously, it's sailing themed, but not actually sailing.
Okay.
I would agree with that. I think the outfits are really cool, and I know that Trouble Brewing is better as an activity recently.
I mean, it got nerfed pretty bad.
I know it got nerfed, but at least the gameplay has more options.
Oh, okay, yeah,
than
sure.
just like I know people will still like, does it fill like 100 buckets so they're done and they'll AFK with it all, but like people have ways they can engage more meaningfully now, and it's at least better than it was like years ago. But I do agree that like I would rather it was more sailing related, but I don't know, like it's definitely a sore sentiment. Like I'm always for like it'd be cool like if there was an NPC, for example, that engaged you differently because you had that outfit, for example.
Yeah.
But I would hate to be like, you're required to go and get this outfit. That especially if the content isn't like, if people don't want to do that content as it is. Like it's in this weird place where I guess it's like mostly like a clogging thing, right?
Yeah. Okay. Well, something that just came to mind. I mean, we have the pirate hook and crab claw. I mean, we have the pirate hook you can just get from Brimhaven Agility, and obviously that's very the sailing themed, which I like, the kind of pirate look. And then this is just so bizarre. I don't know if you guys watch Family Guy, the guy Seamus with the like 4 peg legs, but they're just all like those little like wooden arms and legs. You guys know what I'm talking about? That guy.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
I have no idea.
Okay, I'm gonna take a picture for you, Husky, and this is the guy I'm thinking of. And this guy. So what I'm wondering is, you know, are we are we gonna be able to get peg legs as you know, maybe on the lines of like stale baguette rarity, where like you're doing some sailing activity and you get a peg leg, and now you're just walking around with a peg leg, and you got your pirate hook, and maybe you can even just go even beyond and really just start making your guy look like a quadriplegic of just peg legs, basically, and peg arms, just, you know, to really get into that pirate slash sailing theme.
I'd be all for it, and I you know, just doing the stupid thing of you unlock a left peg leg and a right peg leg separately, and you can go to, you know, Patchy and get them stitched together.
Yeah.
You know, I'm all for it.
I just want to see my guy running Sepulcher with the two peg legs, just looking silly. Yeah.
I'm all for like just lots of random stuff existing in the game that's like just for better or for worse, because I know people like hate on this as well, but like, you know, the Guardians of the Rift like bag and stuff, you know, like the pouch. I'm all for just doing it, and what the hell, what's this random thing I got that like is moderately rare enough that it's off the beaten path, or like, you know, maybe like we do it less through like random drop tables, but just like there's this, you know, Easter eggy kind of thing, like I did with the Mask of Rebirth. If you know that thing, the secret like room inside the TOA vault room.
Oh yeah.
So like I'm all for like these cool cosmetics. It always just comes down to like, can we get an artist to do them? And we know an artist who loves doing silly ideas. If you can sell him on the silly idea, it usually just appears in the repository like a day later. So
yeah,
maybe this is one of them.
That would be amazing. I just think it'd be cool. I mean, beyond that, even, I mean, I'm such a fan of any form of customization with players. I mean, I've always been a fan of cosmetics coming from clue scrolls and just throwing them out there. I mean, just throw as much as you want out, because obviously they're just all cosmetic, and it just gives you more and more and more variety to pimp your character out. But one of the things that you guys have done a great job with is, you know, allowing more hairstyles and, you know, beards and everything going on. But what we still don't have is you can't have a different colored haircut with a different color beard. And I'm just waiting. I mean, I'm a blonde in real life, but my beard is red. And I'm just like, I really want to get that vibe of like the ginger beard going on with well, I'm barely blonde anymore. I'm just balding at this point. But like, I would love that. And this was something I don't know who I talked with. It might have actually even been you, Husky, or maybe it was Mod West. Actually, it probably was Mod West, where I was like, when are we going to get tattoos in this game, you know, where you can like kind of get like a sleeve going on, like just really pimp your guy out. And it could be from some, I don't know, rare thing. But that's what I want to see. I want to see our like real customization with our players. I think it would be sick.
Yeah, no, that'd be really cool. I think the beard and hair color is an interesting one where, strangely enough, would need engine work to get that done.
Really? Yeah.
I don't know if you might have seen some of the random items that we've got in game where they kind of slightly change color based on, I don't know, your skin color, hair color, or like part of your clothing or something. None of the examples are springing to mind, but there's a few random items that do it. And yeah, it's just one of those kind of weird quirks of how the player works.
Yeah, well, I'm throwing it out there just because I'm just such a huge fan. I think the customizable boats, we have so much customization with POH, and then if we could really go to town on our characters, I think that'd just be awesome. So, okay, here is here's some questions actually that you guys kind of wanted to bring up, and so I'll ask it, and then you guys can answer. So, why were there no unique rewards for completing both of Varlamore's token hunts? And I'm also going to allow you guys to just give a little bit of like a backstory with that for people that don't know what that token hunt was. And it goes on saying, I understand that the focus was more on the hunt itself rather than the rewards, but considering the amount of effort put in by the community, the rewards felt really underwhelming.
That sounds like one for you, Lenny.
Yeah, so to give the background to it, the red token hunt was something that came out with Varlamore Part 1, I believe. I'm going to say yes, that's right.
Yes, it is.
And it was, well, it's all been solved now. The gist of it was basically that depending on a bunch of bizarre factors, the length of your display name being a big thing involved, different days of the week you'd be able to do different, very specific activities and get a red token for it. So one of the ones that people quickly found, although they didn't quite get the circumstances around it, was you could kill a buffalo and you simply need to do it while wearing gloves on the right day of the week to get this token. And it's it's this interesting thing that I was very careful to never go out and say, hey, I've got a puzzling game, hey, I've got a hunt for you guys to solve. I just kind of left people to find it, and there were a couple of times that I did comment on it in, the Crack the Clue Discord. And I'm kind of sad that I felt the need to in some cases. I think, I felt that I did need to because people were going to go way too far down a rabbit hole of, thinking, okay, is this in game? Isn't this in game? Do we need to wait for Vulnerable Part 2 and 3? And I wanted to kind of like make sure that people weren't under any false pretenses about it. But still very careful to never actually label it as a puzzle or a hunt because, as people later came to find, there were no rewards involved. It was really, from my perspective, just a sort of fun thing for, let's see if people can band together and put together these most obscure sets of circumstances. And it came down to the final token, which I think it was months between the 6th and 7th token being found. It ended up being an Ultimate Iron Man that happened to have been wearing a party hat for the past 10 months, went into the Colosseum and found a token in the loot.
Wow.
And, people are kind of, some people felt a little hard done by. They were thinking, there was no way that I was going to get that. The Ultimate Iron Man part obviously not being a relevant factor. It was, you needed to wear a party hat. And I kind of didn't want people to be able to intentionally find it. I didn't want it to be a solvable thing in that sense. I wanted people to just sort of stumble across these. And, people sort of picked up on there was a second token hunt that happened in Vulnerable Part 2, which I'll say up front, I had nothing to do with that one. I'm not going to drop in who was responsible for it. But, that was kind of just done taking inspiration from the red token hunt. And I'm also not going to promise, isn't there going to be stuff in the future? But when there's things like this that are laid out that are just clearly sort of poking a bit of fun at itself and intentionally obscure, really convoluted, and that we've not made any mention of, we've not said there's anything to be won there, I'll try and keep your expectations low, really. Because, it's really just meant to be a little bit of fun.
Well, there's two more questions on this, and one is, can we expect something new to come from it at any point? And if there is going to be a third hunt for the final expansion of Varlamore, will it also lack unique rewards?
Yeah, I suppose in short, the answers are maybe, and yes, it's probably going to lack unique rewards. There's some chance that we throw in some goofy cosmetic or something, but like I say, I'll keep people's expectations low on it. If I'm doing something like this and clearly not labeling it, don't expect don't expect too much from it.
It goes to what I said earlier, right? Like, people forget this a lot. Like, it's about the journey, not the destination. People will go, oh, well, like, I didn't have fun doing all this. And it's like, well, you didn't have to. You could have just sat from the sidelines and not, looked up the hunt stuff. But, like, there were communities that formed around this. There were people who spoke to each other who've never spoken before. Like, it's the corniest thing in the world to be like, oh, Gil, it's more than just a game. It's about being part of the RuneScape community. But, like, I don't know, whether you're just like vibing, chilling in like the forestry Discord and like being part of like scouting Ents or like stuff. It's always cool when there's things that are like just bringing people together and interacting, even if it's not like some big cool goal. And I think that the nice token hunt to me captured like that, right? It was about this cool thing that a bunch of people could opt into just trying to get together, knowing they were weird, crazy, zany, and you didn't need a reward, right? Because it created a cool like memory or experience for those people.
Yeah,
I don't know. That's my thought.
It's it doesn't necessarily soften the blow for the people that did want rewards out of it, but I also I sort of love the fact that people were so in touch from the get go. As soon as they found there was a key that you could examine that says it's a nice key, people picked up that, oh, me and Ed did something before about something nice, and so this is going to be me and Ed doing something stupid again. And I saw people speculating in the Practical Clue Discord that, hey, there's no, new items or anything for this in the cache. I bet the reward's just going to be a red topaz, and they nailed it. And it took another 10 months for them to find out, but they were sort of that in touch with the level of stupidity that we were going for with it, which I don't know how I should feel about it. I do like that, but I don't know if I should be happy about it.
No, I think it's cool, and I resonate with that. Like, just getting the community together, like that was just a fun journey, and there wasn't an excellent reward at the end. It was just about the journey itself. So, what about what are your guys' thoughts on like the Helmet of Moon, for example? I personally love it. I love how just stupid it looks, and it's just so stupidly rare. And on top of that, I want to ask, like, do you think that should be a thing in the collection log?
I personally would say yes, it should be part of the collection log, and I realize that I'm in a strange position where I made the collection log in the first place and don't necessarily see eye to eye with how some people view it. I personally like the collection log to just be a sort of superset of everything that there is to possibly get, not something that you're actually aiming to realistically complete. And I think a lot of people do want to see it as something completable. That's why we got the super rares from Clue Scrolls split out. But I'm personally all for just throw in these goofy things that we don't necessarily expect anyone to actually go and put in the grind for.
I agree. I think it should be on there, and I think it's much harder to add it now that it released without it on, because then you run into the whole people got it but then they didn't tick it off and it's so rare, right?
Yeah.
I don't know. I couldn't speak to the team who implemented that. Like, for all I know, they had like a massive conversation about it and ultimately decided against it, and it's like, cool, I guess they must have had some really good reasons for that, or came to different conclusions, or wanted different things in their content. But I would agree with Lenny. My personal thoughts are I would have liked to see it on. I feel like I'm definitely in the middle ground though, because as the developer who enabled probably a lot of people with clogging, with just I don't know, the counters and highlighting sections green that I did in game jam projects, and recently with the tiers, I'm very much a big fan of the idea of highlighting achievements and your clog and going out your way to do it. But I agree that players take it to an extreme that is just unhealthy.
That's an understatement. Yeah.
It's one of those things where it should be celebrated how many cool log slots you got, but I don't know, I dabbled for a bit in the World 444 forestry thing, and the amount of people obsessing over the chicken, it's 4 log slots, and people complaining they go dry on the chicken pieces, and I'm like, yeah, but these should be some of the last things you fill out. I've seen Iron Men in there who are 500 log slots, right?
Yeah.
And it's why is this the grind you're choosing to do? I don't get it. But people obsess over it, and I think for me, I've always thought that the fact that Third Age exists and Gilded exists, it's more impressive because it's ludicrous. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
There's something to that, but people will always complain for things to be made easier, that it's not on rate. Could you imagine if we released a Bloodhound rarity pet in this day and age, and people would go, "You can't do that. Pets are very standard. This is how long they take." That's how people would respond in this day and age, right?
Yeah.
So I think clogging, players know this, clogging causes a lot of unhealthy behaviors, but I still wouldn't see it. I still wouldn't remove it, right? I'm a big fan of the activity. I just I don't know. There's a lot of entitlement in general when you get dry in a drop to be this is so stupid, game's stupid. I what the hell? I won out this prison and stuff, and I'm yeah, but I don't know. You can just choose other grinds. Everyone except Marnie, I guess.
Yeah. No, I agree with you. And I'm with you as well with the collection log. I think there's obviously pros and cons to adding these, what I call them as structures in the game. I think collection log is the least quote unquote structured thing. I think just because it has no rewards to it. I think that's what's ultimately the most healthy about it. As soon as there's actual real perks coming from clogging, that's when stuff goes south. And we sort of see that with CAs. We don't need to jump into that conversation. We'll stick it with collection log. But it's like as soon as there's any sort of perks, that's when some things can just feel worse, even though maybe the pros still outweigh the cons. There's just more cons added. But I'm with you where like I think what you did with the clog update was just phenomenal. And I wasn't even a fan of the wieldable staff at first. I just thought that was overkill. I thought the book was just a nice kind of like a nice enough touch, but I'm not gonna lie, those staves look beautiful. They're great looking. So yeah, I'm a fan, and I'm also with both of you as the Helmet of the Moon definitely should be in the clog, and it should always be considered the collection log, not the completion log. And yeah. I think in my head, the only thing that actually makes sense to be excluded from the clog are PvP minigame things, because that just destroys PvP minigames when you just got a bunch of cloggers going in there and just like, hey, what's the easiest way to abuse this just so I can just get my clogs and get out of here. So it's the only real place I see it's healthy to not add it to the clog. But
yeah, I could definitely see like the question always becomes less about like it's in the same veins, I guess, as to what you just said, right? It's like, does putting something in the collection log warp how people will engage with the content? Is like a constant question, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then does that make your content worse? I think, for example, like even just like economy impacts, like I'm very much a big fan of what like Araxor did, for example, where you can destroy the corpse to get like an extra roll of the pet. And that's not technically a clog thing, but like it kind of is, because there's a lot of people who are only going for the pets, not because of like necessarily wanting all pets, but because they want to complete the Araxor log, right? Because they really enjoyed that boss, but then, you know, they pump in a ton of rancors, potentially. The option to, I'm just missing the pet, so if that's all I care about, I can destroy, is like a really cool option. But like, it's something we have to be aware of. It's like, how will people engage with the content?
Yeah.
Because this system exists around it.
It is interesting. We're playing in a time now where there really are a handful of players getting quite close to full collection log completion, which is just absolutely bizarre to think. I mean, I think Marnie is like genuinely like 15 slots away or something, just stupid.
It's crazy though, right? Like, I'm sure you've completed Barrows on at least one account, if not more than one.
Yeah, just
and
one.
It's like, you know what it's like, unless you spooned it, because some people do spoon their last like Barrows piece, but like usually it's like, oh, I'm missing one Barrows piece at like 800-900 kill count, and then I need to go to like double that for the last piece, right? Because that's like, because it's 1 in 24 to hit the specific piece, right?
Mm-hmm.
As opposed to when you were 2 pieces away, it was 1 in 12, right? Like I think that's the problem, is that Marnie looks closer than they are, but like, I mean, who knows? Like, I think if every person in the game had done exactly the same amount of clues as Marnie, I'm sure like there's a universe out there where one of those people have completed all the Gilded, all the Third Age, right? There has to be like, it's probably still astronomical, but like, you know, when you say every player who's ever played this game, and you're talking about millions of people, like, you need to first get to Marnie's completion, then you need to be like godly spooned on top of that, right?
Yeah,
it's like insane.
This was something that was brought up. Oh crap, who was it with? It was the idea. Oh, it was with Badman. He's a Iron Man with all pets, and we were talking about, you know, the destroy option that's been added to a lot of these bosses. So it's not flooding the economy with loot, but the pet hunters that want a slightly easier time can just destroy the loot and then get a double chance of the pet. And I just spitballed the idea. I'm not advocating for this at all, but I just thought it was a cool like thought. Was, what if you could destroy caskets and you destroy your master casket, and not only would you get an improved bloodhound rate, but maybe there's a double chance of Third Age, but you're not going to get any other loot besides that. So it's just going to be like the worst possible feeling, just destroying master caskets. But if you're a clogger and you really want to go hard, that's going to be the way. Yeah, I don't know if you guys have any thoughts on that. It's so masochistic. I'm not advocating for this to be introduced to the game, but yeah.
That sounds horrible for them. Like, I've just like, it's not even just that, like, yeah, you're technically, it's the only thing you care about. It's the person who's like, I've destroyed my last 1,000 master caskets and I have no pet and no third. Like, can you, like, that person will exist.
Oh yeah, many times over. Yeah, horrible.
Did you see that a plugin someone made to like show you your missed casket loot?
Yes.
I can't believe someone made that, and I will question the sanity of anyone who installs that, because that's just like, because like at the same time, like the plugin person could just say like for random like, yeah, I've actually like doubled the chances of third age or something, and no one would know, right? I'm sure like
Exactly. Yeah.
maybe it's open source, but for all you know, like for that one day they changed it, right? And then you're like, what the hell? I missed out on that. You're just taking it at face value, but like, I don't know. Even if they are completely honest about it, it's still ridiculous because like, I don't know, like the idea of missing out on something like that, like for an Iron Man, it's kind of like whatever because it's like mostly a clog and a random fashion item, and maybe you drop trade it to your main account or whatever, or you do whatever. But like, for like, imagine just like, I don't know, you're like a level 100 person who's completed a quest cape, turned it on for fun, opened it, and it's like, cool, there's like a 2 bill, like there's your shadow and your T-bow or something like that down the
Oh
drain. That's like,
gosh.
that's horrible.
See, I think what would actually make it more fun is before the loot is destroyed, you actually do open the casket. So you see every bit of loot. So you still get the satisfaction of seeing what you got. But if it's not third age and if it's not a pet, it just gets destroyed right as it's closed, like that interface is closed. Yeah, be quite interesting. Do you guys have any thoughts? Let me ask you, Lenny. Like, do you like the destroy option in general? Do you think you guys are gonna? Obviously, you're probably not involved in that team or those decision makings. It seems like it's for the developers of the boss itself. But do you like that system?
Yeah, I think it's a really nice touch. I think it's something that, trying to apply it to clues, for example, or, just retroactively applying it to any other boss is probably trickier than doing it, up front. I think there's a lot of things like that would like to say, if we were building the game from the ground up nowadays, we'd do things differently. We'd, have that destroy loot system on a lot more bosses. But they're changing it now is just probably out of the question. I think it's a really nice thing for us to start doing more of, though. And I think, we're playing around a lot more with loot mechanics in general. I suppose raids were the first time where we really started needing to play around with how loot's distributed. But we started doing it as well with, with Nex and Nightmare, and then moving on from there. And it's interesting to see over time sort of what are the loot systems that people do take well to. And, this destroy sort of option seems to be one of them that people do like.
Yeah, I mean, you had Arcane on, like, it was a few months ago now, right? And he had this whole spiel about, like, how loot is, like, the hardest thing to develop and, like, loot systems. And, he's done, like, so many bosses now to this point and still doesn't know the answer. But I think it's still, like, merit to like, him and his team of, like, that work on it, that they're constantly trying to innovate and tweak things. Even if you didn't like Desert Treasure 2 systems, like, with the hidden roles, like, was there something there about the drop rate protection? But then we also got a bunch of feedback about like, oh, it feels bad to not be able to spoon something. So like, then you look at like other boss systems like that came after that to see like, cool, how could that be changed? And then Yama's obviously been very creative with how it handles like getting the full set of armor and stuff, and that'll be interesting to see how that plays out.
Yeah, speaking of Yama, actually, I'm okay, maybe I'm just completely out of touch because I made a tweet just on the so there's a blog this morning coming out with a new proposed armor and like the cosmetics. So I love how the default looks. It kind of has that Inquisitor's vibe with the sort of like ponytail on the helmet, which I just love. It looks very knightly. And then the cosmetic version is just white and black, like really pale white, and I just love it. Like, I think it looks so cool. But everybody on Twitter is like disagreeing, it seems like. I mean, I'm getting a lot of likes on it. Maybe the people that are liking it actually do like it, but anybody that's commenting is like, I don't like this. It looks like there's some Uggs that you're wearing, kind of a lower, and just people that don't like it. I'm obsessed with this. Like, I have it pulled up on my end right now, and I just think this looks so cool, and like I would want this so bad. What do you?
Yeah. Oh, you go.
Okay, I love the look of it personally. I think people will always try to be judging like, okay, how does it fit with the rest of the best in slot gear that we've got?
Mm-hmm.
And I personally like the black and white plus red. Other people might just not. But I think the thing that stands out to me is that third age has always been the black and white armor.
Yeah.
And it's been like such an iconic thing that just other gear we've had doesn't really stand up to. So it's really cool to sort of see some of that same flavor in this new set.
Yeah,
I'm a big fan of the white armor.
Yeah.
I'm a simp for it. I thought you were about to say you hate it and you don't get it. I thought you were about to be like, I thought I was going to fight you for it.
Oh, no. I'm obsessed. I think I was genuinely kind of upset with how the original version looked. It just looked overly saturated red. And even the second version that kind of had that more Inquisitor's vibe wasn't doing it for me. But I actually I'm going to pull up the other, just like the default version that you get, just so people can see it on my end. And I want to just remember what it looks like exactly. But it's just, oh yeah, this just looks phenomenal. I mean, what's interesting about this is, and I mentioned this on my stream, maybe on a ramble as well, of like this Oathplate armor, the default look, really has that Inquisitor's vibe. I would almost have thought this would have been a combination armor of like Justicer and Inquisitors infused. I know that's been an idea that's been brought up. I don't know how the team feels about that, or even the wider community for that matter. But even this default version looks so good, and the white is just so sick, so clean. I'm all about it. It looks awesome.
I've been bordering on like burned or unburned. I can't make my mind up for like the last like 6 months. I swear I saw that armor and it's like unburned and instant. Like I'm gonna be living at Yama. I want to get myself some Oathplate gear. I'm like a massive like I love like paladins in like most fantasy lore. We don't really have that in our game necessarily. It's not quite the same as like, you know, like the holy armor, but like I've always been a big fan of that. Like I know there's like a bunch of like red and black best color combination Blood Torva simps out there, and you know, they still have their Blood Torva, you know. I'm sure like some of them might like the base version of Oathplate, but like I'm just glad we're experimenting with some different colors, because I've actually not a massive fan of the whole like red black like sort of like color scheme, and like
I think it just gets old. It gets old over time. This looks amazing. Oh, one of the differences I'm actually seeing now that I have two of them pulled up is it looks like the shoulder blades of the original one that kind of looks like that Inquisitor's color scheme has the same sort of shoulder design on both shoulder blades, and then the other one is more asymmetrical, where just one of the shoulder blades has that like those thorns sticking out. So that's interesting. I thought it was just colors, but there is some slight differences, looks like.
I never noticed that.
Yeah, but this just looks amazing. I really hope, with some of the backlash that's sure to come, I hope you guys just ignore it selfishly. just bring this out, please. Like, I want this so bad. And literally everything about it is perfect. Like, people are complaining that it looks bottom heavy. I don't think so at all. Like, this armor is supposed to be like padded and, you know, like have some real thickness to it. I love this. I love this so much. So anyway, shout out to the artists. Like, this is just great. This is like the first time I've really had no complaints over the armor. So this is amazing.
The only conversation topic harder than a best in slot piece of equipment sort of like balance discussion is how that piece of equipment should look. It's an infinitely harder discussion because it's so subjective. We could all sit there and we can math out whether this proposal should do this, and here's my proposal, and here's how it should work. But like when it comes down to how something looks aesthetically, like it's a war zone. Like sometimes you just hit it and it's quiet, but then other times it's like, you know, you've got people with pitchforks on either side.
Yeah, no, I'm a huge fan. So for what it's worth, I mean, I'm always complaining about what things look like in this game, but this is the one time where I'm like, okay, you guys nailed it. Yeah, very happy.
You gonna be in a duo for it, Lenny? Like, are we just gonna kill Yama together?
I'm down. I mean, I'll be a hard anchor, but like, go for it.
Yeah.
See,
I need to get some gear first, but yeah.
So I've been playing this new Iron Man, and I don't have any like real melee set yet. I've just been rocking Proselyte for everything, and my intention was get an ACB, get an SGS, go to Inferno kind of early with those, get an Infernal Cape, and then my plan was just go to Bandos immediately and just melee flick my Bandos set, which would obviously take a long time. But now that Yama's dropping, I'm like, okay, is it going to be feasible for me to just grab some Giga Chad that's pimped out and I just, you know, get carried by him and I pull full Oathplate, and then who knows about the challenges. I mean, I'm assuming it's all still going to be duo, so I feel reasonably confident with my abilities. However, my account sucks, so I just wonder, do you guys think that kind of crappier accounts can just kind of get carried and get this armor? Because this is a huge skip. I mean, you could just skip Bandos, skip next for that matter, unless you want a ZCB, which is obviously still huge, and obviously the Van braces are big. But I don't know. Do you think it's possible to just get carried hard there?
I'm not exactly in touch with how the development of it's been going, but I imagine that's been something on the team's mind. I can't imagine it's something that they've just kind of ignored. I expect they'll be looking to largely prevent it, but yeah, like I say, I don't really know.
Yeah,
I was part of some discussions, but I still don't think I should give an answer. It's like
okay.
Lenny's like on the money with like it's something that has been talked about and considered, but like and the systems will be designed around it, but like the definition of what is carried and like like what level, like I don't know. You can imagine like doing a raid, right? If you never do the mage roll in Tob, did you technically get carried, right? Like if that's a harder roll, but like I don't want to get into the boss design mechanics yet. Like it's something they're very aware of. I think it's very hard for me to answer without like giving stuff away, right?
Yeah, I mean, Tob is actually a great example of a place where people really can get carried and just pull really amazing items. We see it all the time because it's a 5-man raid. You really can just leech. And the way Tob works, if nothing's changed as far as I'm aware, it's just don't die. Like just do a little bit of DPS, don't die. You won't get MVP in any room, but at least you'll get a decent chunk of points, even if you did barely any damage. It's just, you just go in there. I remember Cloud Badass when he was streaming years back, just rocking with a level 60 account with a rune crossbow with ruby bolts, and he was, just doing great, getting great loot potential every raid. So I don't know. I feel like there always is those just use cases or like abuse cases where it's just like this can kind of be abused, and if you want to do it, like go for it. There's really no way around it. Ultimately, what are we going to try to do as a team? Like just lock it? Like, oh, you have to have a certain skill total before you do this or something? That just sounds arbitrary. So
yeah, I mean the deeper you go trying to restrict it like that, which like Husky says, I'm sort of detached from it. So anyone trying to speculate what they should be planning out for Yama, don't listen to me. I've got no idea what I'm talking about. But the more you try and lock it down, the more you're just going to be punishing, the genuine players that are there trying to enjoy it.
You're right. Okay, let's touch on the future of this game. So we're getting Yama soon. We're getting Delve Boss. Do you guys have anything you'd like to share on Delve Boss? You guys obviously have been clearly working on sailing for the past couple of years, but anything you guys would like to share on that? Yeah.
I think like I not really. I think the closest I got to Delve Boss was like giving some opinions and on rewards, which that was a whole thing as well.
You want to
like
share? I mean, I'm imagining Shadow came up.
Yeah, I think like I basically like I think the blog we had was that was released very recently was very transparent and basically echoes a lot of the sentiments that I remember discussing in that meeting. Right? Is that basically the commitment to like we won't come out with another piece of Bis Mage until we've addressed Shadow, and we acknowledge that this is a band-aid fix, and band-aid fixes can be re-looked at as part of addressing Shadow, right? Because it's really difficult. Like you've got like a really powerful weapon that needs to feel good and powerful to use. Like it does that really well, but like everyone was like coming up with their design to fix it on Reddit, right?
Yeah.
And I don't think you would get everyone to agree on it, any of them either. Some of them are more promising than others, but like I think just that whole like the only thing I would say is like I'm really happy with where we ended up. I think we've got some pretty solid rewards. From what I hear from the playtesting internally, it's gone pretty well, but I don't have any personal experience with that. Sailing very much is like a project that just like takes up a lot of your time and focus, right?
Yeah.
And especially like as we get closer to launch, I find myself like, God, this is like a whole conversation topic as well, but there's like a level of trust you need to have with the team. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like if I was there in every single meeting, first of all, like my opinions might be terrible, but if I was giving my opinions and everything, it could also just be like, God, we can't get this guy to go away, right? But like the team know that like for those who want my opinion, they know they can reach out for my opinion. Do you know what I mean? But I sailing as a whole is like such an important topic to get right, or project to get right in general, that it's just like my opinion has been like I dabble in a few things here and there, but like as far as giving feedback and stuff, it's like just gotta trust them to do their stuff. Like we have we have a really good team. Like as much as players like to complain about stuff, we genuinely do watch feedback and decide, do we go, do we pull it, do we not, right? Like do we do this, do we do that? Like even just like, I mean, I know we're not going to talk about it, but just like the whole like clue stuff, like like just the decision to go, yeah, this is coming back to the drawing board. We listen. We do that a lot. Like we, so I don't think my trust is misplaced for the rest of the team either. I think that just some topics are harder to talk about than others.
Yeah, I think that's been a really interesting thing to sort of get to grips with over the years as well, which I've definitely kind of found myself going on this journey of, I joined the team back when there were 5 other designers maybe. And I suppose, Husky, you've been on a pretty similar journey. You joined not too long after I did. And, you know, we've since then scaled up a huge amount to 17, 18 designers nowadays. And, you know, back when I first joined, it was very much a possibility, a reasonable thing to do to keep in touch with everything that was going on around the team. You know, I could afford to sit in sort of design discussions about everything that we were doing, more or less. But as we just kept scaling up, that's just absolutely not the case. There's, you know, too much going on nowadays for any member of the team to stay invested enough to have, you know, meaningful contributions to every single thing that we're doing.
Yeah, it's yeah, go for it.
I say the side effect of that as well, by the way, is because if you can't get fully invested or keep up to date in everything a project is, there's an amount of like expectation that like even your surface level thoughts, while you know you can give them and stuff, the team's probably thought about it more. Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely, yeah.
So while like, you know, from time to time we bring up things that like either, oh, like have you thought about this or that kind of thing, like for the most part, like if you get involved, like it's just like, oh yeah, we already thought about this and had a big discussion about this ages ago and this was our sort of conclusions, right? Sometimes that comes up and you're like, yeah, just got to trust the team to do their thing, right? Like the team is actually incredible. Like there's so many passionate people and creatives. Every time I see a comment where it's like, oh, the old school team don't care, I'm like, oh, come off it. Like, oh, this is the team of the people who care the most about anything in the world, it feels like. Or at least that's my perspective on the inside.
I mean, even on the outside, I agree with you full on. And what's difficult is no matter how like particular and how dedicated and passionate you guys are on this, ultimately, it's almost like, it's kind of like backwards in a way, where it's like the more passionate you get, the more we're going to nitpick on the things that we see as like not being aligned with, you know, what the community thinks or something. And it's just, but ultimately, I mean, 99% of what you guys are doing is just right on point, at least in my eyes. And like you guys say, I mean, you have to appeal to such a large community that has differing viewpoints and people that PvP only, and people that just want to do PVM, people that like the role playing and the skilling, and it's just like to nail that down is so it's seemingly impossible. I mean, I will throw out ideas on rambles, and then I'm like, you know, somebody in the comments will be like, oh, well, this affects UIM, like that this would be horrible, and I'm like, oh geez, like yeah, I completely forgot, like there's so many other communities that get affected by the tiniest things. And even modding in just on Sunday when I was talking with him, it's like the engine is just, I mean, he brought up the example of BA. I mean, people are running BA and you make any slight little change to anything and it just ruins it or breaks it or just causes instability or something's going on with this super ancient piece of content. And it's like, that must be so hard to juggle. I mean, you're juggling so many things at once and making these tiny little changes. It's difficult, but yeah, I think you guys are doing a wonderful job.
I think the problem is that like the communities sometimes like to simplify it, right? Where they go like, oh, here's what all the noobs think, and here's what all the high levels think, or here's what all the sweats. It's always like a two-sided thing. It's so much more like convoluted than that, right? Like like you can keep splitting the players up and up and up into different opinions, different takes, right? I mean, we've seen that with sailing nonstop. It's not just here's a high level opinion, here's a low level opinion. It's literally down to like you keep splitting it down. I've probably heard like hundreds of different opinions on just sailing, the sailing skill. Do you know what I mean? All from
Yeah.
people from different backgrounds, but people tend to shut out everything that's like, here's my opinion and here's the enemies, here's the rest. You know what I mean? They don't like people. It's not the player's job to go comb through all the feedback and come to their own conclusions, right? That's our job and our CM team's jobs, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it is incredibly difficult, but it is very rewarding and worth it at time. I never take for granted how great this job is. I'm sure Lenny feels the same.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Let's touch on the summer sweep up that's coming. Do you guys have any maybe teasers of what that's going to entail? Sounds like some drop tables are going to be adjusted around that time.
I would say not too much. I think like anything I knew about the summer sweep up that you guys didn't know at RuneFest is basically in the blog that came out with Paul 84 with like some of the Sire stuff that's changing. So I don't really know about the drop table stuff. Again, that comes a little bit down to like I know the team involved and I trust that team. So and I'm sure like when they have things to share about specifics, they'll be putting that to the team for review, and it's something that like I'll definitely be trying to have a nosy in as well. Like especially like this isn't even like a unique perspective in the team anymore because we have so many people that play now. But like I definitely try to when I look at anything that's like drop table related to try and put like my Iron Man hat on, if you know what I mean, because it's a very different perspective. Even then, like I'll miss things, but like you know, I think for things anything they're doing with like drop table stuff, which again I don't know what, it's just speculating, right? But like I always try to think like how could that affect different game modes more or different people, right? Because for mains, I think it mostly just comes down to here's uniques and here's things that give me money on the way to getting uniques, which is obviously a very different perspective.
Yeah. Lenny, any thoughts?
Nothing really for me to add there. No, I think it's one of those cases where it's definitely not my sort of specialty within the team. There's people that I'd trust so much more with it nowadays. I think hopefully Husky would agree with me that my place is very much. I'm here to figure out what's technically possible nowadays. I used to be a lot more sort of upfront involved in the actual sort of gameplay implications side of it. But nowadays I'm all about just enabling other people and less drop tables, balancing.
Okay.
I do think that like my personal thoughts as a whole is that like just looking at one of the examples brought up with like Spoils of War, Soul Wars, I'll be particularly interested in that because I've generally been against the Spoils of War sort of drop table. I think it feels like a mid-level boss's drop table you can get at level 3 on an iron, right?
Mm-hmm.
But obviously, like Iron Men are only one group of people, right? So, like putting my Iron Man hat on, I have a lot of problems with this drop table, personally. That doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad drop table, right? But I do like see it whenever you see a new Iron Man series come out. Like I was watching some of the farmers stuff, and it's like, cool, we go to Soul Wars and get access to all this stuff because that's not the efficient like way to do it. And I'm like, yeah, it changes a lot of that feeling of that game mode, and maybe that's okay. Maybe that's what a 2025 Iron is, right? But example of something where I'm particularly interested to see what happens, but I don't know if it's like how far on the radar it is or not, right? Like I say, you can only have your fingers in so many pies, to use the expression, right?
So what are your guys' plans post sailing? I asked this to Monalena, is she gonna be involved in sailing going forward, or is she gonna be able to, have a little bit of breathing room to work on other projects, because I think she had mentioned the last thing she worked on was Guardians of the Rift, and then it was just like straight to sailing, and then it's just been that since. And Guardians of the Rift dropped so long ago, it seems like. So for you guys, are you wanting to start delving into other avenues with the game and not dedicate every bit of energy towards sailing after it launches?
Yeah, I mean, I don't really know what I actually do see myself on sort of post sailing at this point. I think, prior to working on sailing, I was working on the enhanced client, or sorry, the new official client. It's all of our sort of, the NPC highlights, the sort of various plugin like things, and looking forward to the upcoming plugin API things like that. and then sort of came over to help out on sailing. There's definitely a world in which I end up back there. But I think, getting onto sailing has definitely sort of shown me, maybe I want to get a bit more involved again in some more traditional game content.
All right, Husky.
I'm torn, I think, right? Like, because, like, obviously I don't fully know what will quite be, like, in Sailing's launch, and then, like, I'd be interested to do some post-launch sailing stuff, like, if that's a thing, like, the team wants to pursue. Selfishly, like, I have plans for some Barracuda trial stuff that I think, like, would be better suited for, like, a long-term vision, so I'd love to come back and dabble and do, like, more Barracuda trials than could be possible on launch, because I think there's so much potential in the future for that. But at the same time, I would like the break. It just kind of depends. Like, I think at some point they're going to go, cool, sailing's done. What new projects are coming up? Who should be on those projects? And if any of those projects do require sailing expertise, I feel like it has to be like Elena or I. Just as far as like probably just general knowledge of sailing and how the content impacts it. Like, I know a lot of people on the team could contribute to that a lot, but it always feels like it's one of us.
Yeah.
I think I do have eyes as well on like potentially doing another league again. I did the first 2 leagues, and I still get credited for all the leagues since, but like it's not true. Like, Arcane didn't do the 3rd one, but he did 4 and 5, and he did a phenomenal job with them with his team. I've always kind of chipped in a little bit to like, I mean, leagues were my baby. Like, I can't I can't just like ignore leagues.
Mm-hmm.
But I think part of me knows that whatever, I guess how to put it, I don't know what the next league will do, but I know it has to answer the question of what the hell do we do with sailing. So, as a person who really likes leagues and who really knows sailing, that could be a reasonable fit. That I'm like kind of interested in. But again, it is like kind of go where the team wants. I'm also kind of a little bit like, I'd love to do a boss at some point. I know Arcane's been like taking them all, I guess, for good reason. He's amazing. But like, I haven't done a boss since Arachnis. Like,
wow.
So I'm kind of like,
what was that? 2019?
Thereabouts, yeah.
Wow.
I don't know. I think people like at some point when I joined was like, oh, it's an Iron Man with Infernal Cape. This guy's like a PVM god, and I'm like, no, I'm terrible at PVM. I'm like kind of more a guy. Like, people gloss over the max part of Iron Man. So
yeah.
But like, so I've been assigned on a lot of skilling projects because that's where I want to go. But part of me's like, God, like now that I know so much more about RuneScript, I'm a much better programmer. Like, I wonder if I could do some cool stuff with bosses, or maybe they'll come up terrible. Who knows? I don't know. I've been thinking about it.
I think having, first of all, some fresh, perspectives, because, it has been so long and you've obviously learned so much. And I mean, I'm sorry, like I always bring it up when you're on and even when you're not on, like just how amazing of an update Sepulcher was, and it's aged very well. I mean, I have been just frothing over the idea of like not necessarily a new Sepulcher, but just some agility, some movement-based stuff that could really kind of be that middle ground between rooftops and Sepulcher. I brought up that idea, I think, last time with you, maybe, or maybe it was with somebody else, just the idea of like having a sort of rhythmic click box sort of, agility mini game where it's rhythmic, but you're still clicking on click boxes just like rooftops. It's kind of like this middle ground of, if you there's going to be like an obstacle like Ninja Warrior where you're going on like 8 different monkey bars and you got to click them one tick apart. And if you accidentally miss a click or you click twice in between, you're going to fall off. Just something that's very simple long term, because it's just going to click. It's just going to become total muscle memory. But at the beginning, it's going to feel a little bit like, whoa, wobbly. And I just think, like, selfishly for me, I'm just like, I want Husky being involved in any sort of like movement mini game now, something like that. And then beyond that, I think if you were to jump into a PVM encounter, having an element of movement with a PVM encounter that's not necessarily the highest end of stuff, but something that's just comfy, where you go in there and it just feels good the whole time. It's like an enjoyable experience. I would selfishly love you to be like a part of something like that, movement-based PVM. That'd be amazing.
I know where that's coming from, but like part of me a little bit like selfishly is like, God, I'm always known as the Sepulcher guy. You know
You
what
are. You are.
I mean? Like, I want someone to play another piece of content in mind and go, that was the guy who did that. That was awesome. That was better than Sepulcher. Because for me, it's always like Sepulcher aged so well. It gets praised so much. Like when I was at RuneFest, like, oh my God, I love your content. I love Sepulcher. It's like the thing people say, and I can't like. I can't take that for granted. It's amazing. I'm really grateful that people enjoy the content. That's why we do this. But at the same time, I'm also like, can I be known for something else? Like, I know people get praised to Guardians of the Rift, but like, I swear, people are going to do sailing and they're going to attribute Barracuda Trials to me, which will be correct. And then they'll go, oh, he did another movement thing, hopefully really well.
Guy,
but like at the same time, I'm like, yeah, I've also had a lot of impact on the whole sailing project as a whole. Like, you know, but yeah, it's just difficult, right? Because it makes sense, right? We knew sailing was going to be very movement oriented, right? Like it's a new way of movement. There's a trading method that involves movement. Let's get the guy who did a movement thing really well because he might have some experience that can relate to that, which isn't wrong either, right? But I don't know. But I'm rambling again.
In your world, I mean, you really would love to just jump on a new PVM thing that's difficult and really not have it focused on anything besides just the PVM aspect. Like, let me just expand on that. Is there any mechanics? You obviously don't have to reveal anything if you want to kind of keep it secret, but have you been messing around with PVM in general and see mechanics that like, ooh, this would be awesome if I were to design something? I want more elements of this. Like, can you give us some sort of feel for what you would imagine a PVM encounter of yours looking like?
It's really hard because I've had random, really different ideas that I don't know how to connect and paint the full picture. So, like, the random idea might be really bad, or it could be really good depending on what it's with or implemented with. I think one idea I've loved the idea of is like back when we were doing Nightmare, we floated around a mechanic of like, God, you never played World of Warcraft, did you?
No.
There was a really cool fight that I remember from my childhood, and I thankfully got the chance to replay it again in Classic WoW. But like the Yogg-Saron fight is like the end of this raid, and it has you go fight in the brain room. Half the raid goes into brain room, half the fight stands outside. And I always thought it'd be cool to have like a. I thought of that mechanic for Nightmare, right? Where like, oh, you go inside the dream, and it's like the pretty Nightmare, how she sees herself, and then on the outside, it's like. It's the ugly nightmare, and the team splits up to do that, right? I've always thought it'd be really cool to like do a mechanic like that, and then obviously like with some of the duo content like we've been looking at recently, that's been like cool. What if I had a duo boss where like you're fighting like two different versions of the same thing, but like you know things that you do on one side impact the other, but then like it's such a high level concept that doesn't mean anything because like there's so many ways you could do that really badly, and there's so many ways you could do that really well, and then like does difficulty work and like there's so much more that needs to be built around that, but that's like an idea that's like well, like lodged itself in my brain, you know, that I haven't been able to shake. So maybe something like that.
Yeah, I think we've started sort of seeing a little bit more along those same lines with, as they started, obviously Theatre of Blood being one example of the sort of, you know, the Shadow Realm, the maze with Soted Seg, and then, you know, you've got Whisperer as well, sort of taking you into sort of different space. And I think, you know, there's a lot more that can be done there, a whole sort of whole bunch of different ways you can thematically frame it. It's just a lot of really cool space to kind of take this parallel side of the boss fight.
You just reminded me, I am the movement guy, haven't I? Because like, so it's like hard mode maze was my idea, like with the like
ingrained in you.
Yeah, like honestly, like I didn't do the original so it's like maze, but hard mode maze where it's like, what if it's the opposite? What if it's one person on the outside and three people on the inside, and they see a part of the path? That mechanic played out so well. I'm so happy with that mechanic.
It's awesome. No, and there's so much more to be explored with movement that we haven't even touched, and so I don't know. I'm about it, and you know, I would also love for you to just really go to town on some ideas because I'm sure, like you were just saying, there's so much brewing up in your head, and you've just been having to spend so much time on sailing lately. So I think it would be a cool break for you to get to explore something else. And yeah, go for it.
I think it's bursts of clicks are like the like are really cool with movement. We haven't done a lot with. Like I got really into in the league. It's just a random thought wave I had was like you know is it called like 1.5 tick chins or something where you like you keep the cycle going, but as soon as you break it once, you need to like reset the trap cycle again, where you like never have to. Like, is it called 1.5 tick chinning? I can't remember exactly what the
I actually don't even know that this. I think I've heard this, but I wouldn't be familiar enough.
For example, I really don't like, for example, like tick minute barb fishing. I never got into it. I never got vibed with granite either. But like something about chins, like the rhythm of that, and then like the idea that you set a rhythm and then if you lose it, you need to go for a setup to then I don't know why the setup of the rhythm to then keep a different rhythm going just felt like clean. Do you know what I mean? Like,
yeah. And I think
because it rewards it when you keep a long chain, right?
And there's something important as well about those breaks, those natural breathing rooms. I mean, Guardians of the Rift is obviously a very clear example of like, okay, you gotta chill for a little bit, mine. You're not losing any XP by sitting here and mining. So it doesn't feel like you're wasting time necessarily, but it is a natural pause in the action where then it's like, okay, now we go intense, then we chill out. Now we go intense again, chill out. So, and you're right about like granite and barb fishing, tick manipulate. It's just do this forever. No breaks. As soon as you take 1 second away, you're losing XP. So
yeah, that was something I did talk to Hebox about that with sailing. And one thing I thought was really interesting about the wind catcher method wasn't that, like, obviously wind catcher was busted. We forgot to change the XP value because it was supposed to be something you unlock a bit later than when we gave it the alpha. But the idea that you're doing the 2-tick cycle while also keeping track of something that happens every 30 seconds as like a distraction to break up the rhythm actually was something that was really interesting that came out the alpha. Like, I don't know if I would want it to be the wind catcher, and we don't like I definitely don't like the idea of sailing into the wreckage at a specific angle to not sail off it. But the idea that it's not just like I've always liked the idea of some amount of tip manipulation in shipwreck salvaging, but the idea that like there's this other thing you need to keep a track of that is like worth doing is like kind of cool. I'd like to explore that a bit more. Sorry, I'm tangenting all over the place.
I'm all for it. And Modnin recommended, you bring up Barracuda Trials, for example. It's something I would love to see, and I kind of pitched this idea. It was like, you can just reset Barracuda Trials. Like, whenever you make a mistake, just reset. And I was like, what would be so great is if when you reset, you're already at full speed going. It's just like, boom, instantaneous. You don't even need to pick up that initial speed again. It's just, and it's something I always bring it up. Geometry Dash. There was this game on the iPhone and Androids where you just, as soon as you die or as soon as you want to reset, just instantaneously you are zooming again and just boom, you're at it again. And so there's just this, it's just like no nonsense, instantly back in the action. And I think Barracuda Trials would thrive with that in mind, where it's like, this really has no clunkiness to it. It's just snappy. It's like, as soon as you want to reset, boom, reset, you're going again. And I think there's just like something, because I feel like there's almost like this natural idea that, there should be some sort of punishment for, resetting or some sort of slow down the action or, pause and stuff. But I think players really resonate with something that's just full speed ahead instantaneously. It just feels very satisfying. There's a reason Geometry Dash was like number 1 on the charts for like a year, I swear, years back. So.
I definitely like the idea of being able to start off at full speed on the boat, but like I'm currently playing with the idea that it's unlocked through like something. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's a facility you build on your boat.
Yeah.
But like it was an idea that either I first heard it from player feedback or I first heard it from your podcast. I can't remember, but like, yeah, that's something I couldn't say concretely, but like I'm thinking about.
Yeah.
I think players say like the whole like use wind spells on your sails, and I'm like, no, you're gonna get really annoyed by that. It sounds really cool, but like remembering to bring your wind runes and then remembering that you open your spell book and click on it, players are gonna expect you to like, I want to get on my boat, instantly click the sails, and I instantly win. And I'm like, okay, so now we have to assume that every first click on the sails with wind runes is a. Do you know what I mean? Like it gets messy very quickly. When I'm like, I'd rather it be a facility you build instead of like the whole wind spell thing. But like, on top of that, like we've seen the player feedback about wind spells in general. It's like, just how do you? There's no point integrating it for the sake of integrating it. It needs to feel good to integrate it. Do you know what I mean?
I would say if your accept aid is on, you can cast wind spells on other people's ships that you're crossing and just throw them off. That would be.
Yeah, I feel like this kind of highlights why it's so cool just having, from the very get-go, this whole facility and customization system in place. Is that, when we find these sort of gripes with the way that your boat works, we've got the platform there to sort of build a solution to it. But yeah, like we don't need to tie it to some arbitrary other thing that you've got to bring along with you and sort of do like that, or tie it into restarting the Barracuda trial. We can fix it right through building a solution to it.
Yep. Okay, so last sort of thing I want to ask, and this is regarding sailing, and then if you guys have any last topics you guys would like to bring up, I'm here for it, but then we can kind of wrap things up. This is actually a question I failed to ask earlier on. When PvP in sailing is introduced, how do you imagine it? Will players be risking their gear, their cargo, their boats? Also, is this even on like the docket for launch? I mean, I imagine not for launch, but maybe later down the line. But yeah, what is PvP in sailing going to look like, if at all?
Yeah, so I think you're right that at launch it's not going to be something that's sort of anticipated. It is something that, as we're going through and sort of designing and building combat for PVM, from a technical perspective on how we actually implement it all, and being very mindful to not sort of shoot ourselves in the foot and block off anything there in the future. I think it'd be so easy to just kind of go down pathways that don't lend themselves to that, and that's not what we want to do. We want to make sure that is a possibility if we want to come back to it later. I think what you risk is a really interesting thing to me that we've kind of touched every now and then throughout various discussions on. Can you just give somebody a fully fleshed out boat? Can you trade a boat that's got a bunch of facilities built on it or anything like that? And I think that'd be a really cool sort of opportunity for in PvP. You do just lose your entire boat. I'm sure there's probably some drawbacks to it, but it's a sort of cool thing for us to explore what the risk there is.
Yeah,
Husky?
the content would need to be built around it, right? Like the risk versus reward aspects, and I think I would say like specifics of what's on the line, like obviously boat as Lenny said, like, or even if it's just like the contents of your cargo hold, but then we need to make sure there's stuff you're doing out there that you're putting in your cargo hold. But I think like one of the interesting things PvP on boats, like it's a really cool idea. First of all, just like PvP enabled, me and my squad, we're gonna sink the other guys, but then like, can you cross to their boat and do standard sort of like tribrid combat, or is it boat to boat only? I think like it'll depend on what that content wants to achieve, but I think it's a good opportunity to explore a type of PvP combat that isn't like necessarily the same as traditional PvP combat in our game. Our current game is like PvP in our game is Marmite, right? You love it or you hate it, and on top of that, it's really hard to get into. I think like PvP with boats has an opportunity to like open up like a new way to do PvP in our game. Hopefully really well. And that's not to say I'm against the idea of you going and boarding someone else's boat as a player. I think there's the opportunity for both. It's like both is good, but it's hard to know what shape that takes. But I've seen it come up like time and time again. Like almost every single Discord stage we've done with the players, sailing PvPs come up. I see on Reddit a lot. It's like something that I've seen it suggested so often that it's very clear it's not just like the PvPers asking for it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
I'm really excited to see what shape that takes.
It sounds very complicated to design when you actually start thinking about it. It's like that fantasy mind of like, oh, this is gonna be so cool, and then it's like, oh crap, like where do you even start? But
sailing is 90% vibes, right? Like
yeah,
everything's.
it is.
Do you know what? Game design is 90% vibes. I'm not even gonna like put that on sailing. Like the more I feel like I've been with this company, it's like, yeah, it's just vibes. Like how do you come to decisions? I don't know. It's just vibes.
I know. That's what politics is now these days too. It's literally just vibe checks. It's so everything's vibes these days, 2025. So all right. So let me ask you guys, is there anything that we've missed in our discussions that you think would be fun to touch on before we kind of end things?
I just want to give a big thank you to everyone that played in the alpha and gave us feedback. Something that's like not been very apparent like from the get-go is because we've been silent for a long time with sailing, but like sailing's had the most player feedback out of any project we've ever worked on. The amount of like NDA players we have, whether like we have high skill level players who are like beyond max and pushing ranks. We have people who are PVMers. We have new players, casuals. We have so many people NDA'd that have given a ton of feedback, and the sailing skill in the alpha wouldn't have been half as polished if it wasn't for everything they've said. And on top of that, we've had like parsec playtests with like complete randoms who opted in through our surveys, right? It is only this good because we've gone through all the really bad times of like movement being horrible and things being like overly clunky or unintuitive, and got through that feedback process. So I would just like to dedicate my last few words to like thanking those people, because I think like the alpha success is like partly ours, but it's mostly theirs. The people who I'm talking about know who they are without me doxing names, because I wouldn't want to do that to them.
Yeah, I think it's something that's become so apparent to us as a team. It's it's one thing for us to compare. Here's where we were before. Here's where we are now, and this is better than it was before. But it's another thing for people to just come along, sort of blind to it, coming and seeing it for the first time and saying, "This feels good" or "This feels bad," without that sort of prior experience to guide it and give them a bit of a bias on it. So yeah, I mean the whole thing's been so valuable, just hearing from everyone along the way, but especially just having that fresh perspective. So yeah, doubling down what Husky says, a huge shout out to everyone that's been involved in it.
Okay, well, yeah, no, I think we're in good hands. I'm, trying to be very honest with myself, but also remain optimistic about everything that's coming. And I understand the team is very passionate, and just the fact that you guys are willing to spend your, evenings to talk with me and get, some kind of like off the cuff sort of like feedback, or just discussion, I guess, with the community. I think it's just awesome, and it just shows the level of passion you guys have. So thank you both for coming on today. This was amazing. It's always great, kind of picking your guys' brains, and I'm looking forward to the next several months up until sailing drops later this year. So thank you guys, and I'm trying to think if, well, I'll tell this to the audience. Next week, we're going to be having Mod Knox on, which is going to be really fun. He's apparently, correct me if I'm wrong, you two, but like he's like the Giga Chad PVMer in the Jagex team. Is that right?
I'm sure
that description.
Yeah, I'm sure there's a few people that would like to give him a bit of competition there, but it seems pretty accurate.
Awesome. Well, that's going to be fun. And then the week following, we're going to be having Mod Jerv on, which is going to be great. So thank you guys again for the third time. Thanking you. And we will catch you guys in the next one. Peace.
Yeah, thank you so much for having us.